How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.
this the end? There's a noise inside my head of crying people facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end?
Ein Mensch ist, drum braucht er was zum Essen, bitte sehr. Es macht ihn ein Geschwätz nicht satt, das schafft kein Essen her.
Rum links, 2, 3, rum links, 2, 3, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil ich ein Genial weiter einheizt und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum hat der Stiefel im Gesicht nicht gern. Er will unter sich keinen Sklaven sehen und über sich keinen Herrn.
Drum links 2, 3, drum links 2, 3, und ein Platz genossen ist, weil ich ein Genial weiter einheizt und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Prolet ein Prolet ist, drum wird ihn kein anderer befreien. Es kann die Befreiung der Arbeiter nur das Werk der Arbeiter sein.
Drum links 2, 3, drum links 2, 3, und ein Platz genossen ist, weil ich ein Genial weiter einheizt und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Sweet dreams are made of these. Who am I to disagree? Travel
What up, everyone? Happy Saturday. Welcome to Socialism Saturday. We have got quite a show for tonight. Tonight is not going to be safe for work. It is not going to be safe for kids. If you've got kids in the room with you, you may want to send them out. I'm not joking. This is a very, 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 very adult kind of night. Yeah, we're talking about kink tonight. We're talking about kink and BDSM, and actually, explicitly, we are talking about sadism. We are talking about sadism. We are going to be tonight watching a presentation that was given at the City University of New York, but a couple months ago, talking explicitly about sadism. And so you've already warned your 30-year-old about tonight's stream. Okay, well that's a good start. That's a good start. We don't want anything to we don't want his virgin ears to be spoiled. Guys, welcome to Socialism Saturday. On Socialism Saturday, we watch the real far left, the farthest of the far left, the most dystopian of the dystopian. We are watching real socialist activists who put together a whole presentation series at the City University of New York back in June. This is real. This is taxpayer funded. I actually, you know what, Chris? I actually think the sound is going to be okay. I think it's going to be okay. I actually double checked the sound before we watched it because in one of the previous presentations, they had some audio challenges. I think that the sound is going to be okay for this one, but you know, headphones are always recommended. Yeah, well, Trendlin, you should tell Karen Ann that she should follow her advice that she said live on a podcast one time, and she should fucking apologize to me. She should apologize to me for the amount of lies that she's told about me. She should apologize to me for blocking me and then saying that she did it because I blocked her, because that wasn't real. She blocked me because I spoke out and whistle blew against the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire bullshit and the Mises Caucus bullshit. And this is when Karen Ann was still involved with the Mises Caucus and still liked the Mises Caucus. And she didn't like that I spoke out, and so she shit-talked me, lied about me, and then blocked me so I couldn't respond. And this is after I had never done anything but support the woman. I even knitted the woman a shawl, which she never even said thank you for, by the way. And so if Karen Ann likes you, you should tell Karen Ann that she should put on her big girl pants and apologize. I'm just saying. Anyway, enough about internal libertarian drama. Because we've got kink tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Now, when socialists are talking about kink and sex and BDSM and all of that stuff, people need to understand they're doing this as part of a political statement. This is part of this is queering things to them means pushing back against the normative. Yeah. No, it wasn't that. I never finished that one. Queering stuff to them means pushing back against the normative, and when it comes to sex, they use kink and BDSM and all sorts of crazy stuff to be able to have non-normative sex with each other, which they, for some reason, thinks makes them anti-capitalist. That is what we're walking into. You don't have to agree with the philosophy. I am just explaining what it is. And tonight we're going to be watching a presentation from the City College of New York. This is actually on their YouTube channel. This is the Center for Gay and Lesbian Studies at the City College of New York, and it is called Exigent Sadism. In this moderated dialogue, these people, whose names I will not pronounce, will consider sadism as an ethical practice and a form of care, though a risky one, which they call exigent sadism. Exigent sadism involves the sadist bending of their own will to risk an encounter, not just with others, their bottom's opacity, but also with their own. You may know what we mean. Times when the sadist goes too far that they feel deep current of their own dangerous desires crashing into them. Times that require that they too surrender. This is a 2.5-hour presentation. There is an initial lecture, which you can see, took place in the lecture hall at the City College of New York. And then later, there was a follow-up Zoom conversation. So we're getting a twofer. We are getting two for the price of one. We are getting two Kink presentations for the price of one tonight. It's going to be a long Socialism Saturday. I suggest everyone get some beer and some snacks. Oh, it's funny you bring up Lehman College, Joe. It's funny you bring up Lehman College. Do you guys want me to show you something? I was gonna wait to show you this until a little later in the stream, but let me show you this now. As we're letting people file in, I of course have a couple announcements to make. One of those announcements that I wanted to show you guys, this. I talked about this in a live stream I did on my Substack yesterday. If you're looking for the live stream, this was a Substack exclusive. It's called What They Never Told You About Marxist Librarians. Essentially, I've been working on building out a zine archive directory over on the Center for Left-Wing Studies. The Center for Left-Wing Studies is a nonprofit that I'm starting to try to track and archive all of this primary source evidence we have about the left. Zines are the #1 leftist source of propaganda. I've been researching into zines a lot lately, and one of the things I found that is so disturbing is that essentially the research into zines has revealed to me just how compromised librarianship is. So I need to emphasize this. If you're finding zines are basically hand-produced small batch pamphlets that anyone can print off on their printer. Zines are leftist propaganda. They do them about all sorts of things. Now, sometimes they do zines that have nothing to do with politics. They might do zines about music and art and other things that they like and stuff like that. Sometimes they do zines about how to get ready for a demonstration. Medicare privatized and what that's going to do to disabled people. They do zines about the continuing appeal of nationalism. They do zines about Queers for Palestine. They do zines about no borders, no police. They do zines about restoring affirmative action. They do zines with pictures that say, "These faggots fight fascists." They do zines titled "Decolonize Means Attack." This is just what I have sitting on my desk literally right now. They do zines about do-it-yourself occupation guides where they teach you how to break into a home and disable alarms and how to use crowbars. I did a whole review of this zine on my website. I got this at an Antifa table in Boston. They do zines about almost any subject. I have a whole bunch of them. I have a massive zine collection, and the collection is only getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. They do zines about doing zines. They have workshops about doing zines. They have conferences about... Like, zines are an intimate part of leftist subculture. And I was reading about the history of zines last night. Almost any time you find a zine out in the wild, it's because of leftists. Almost always. Maybe not 100%, but like 95%. So I was doing some research into the zines, and you know what I started finding as I was building out this zine directory is I have in this zine directory a whole bunch of places where you can download zines online because, of course, we always want to be finding the PDFs of these so that we can archive them. So there's all sorts of places where zines are archived online, and we're building out that list. But then I started finding that colleges and universities in their libraries have extremely large zine collections. So in these university libraries are housing hundreds or thousands, in some cases, of zines in their own little library within the library or special collections. Look at this. Barnard College, Brooklyn College, Harvard. Harvard has a zine library. Bowling Green State University, Lehman College, which is why I brought this up. Lehman College at City University of New York. They have a whole zine collection. DePaul University, where Mary Bowman teaches. Duke University, University of Iowa, Virginia Commonwealth University, Simmons University, Michigan State University, Lesley University, Tufts University. Those are just the ones that I've gotten around to adding so far into the archives. But it's not even just that. Let's continue. Did you know that many major public libraries all over the country have entire zine archives? The Library of Congress. The Library of Congress has a zine archive. The Boston Public Library, the San Francisco Public Library, New York Public Library, Denver Public Library, Somerville Public Library, the Library of Virginia, the DC Public Library, and these are just the ones that I've gotten around to archiving. And so I'm starting to think that this is a bigger problem than even I suspected it was, and I already knew this was a pretty big problem. But, like, just really think about this, guys. Just really, no. Shut the fuck up with the stupid fucking low IQ comments. No. Zines have been around. I know this might come across as crazy to conservatives who don't think past a couple of years ago. I could have majored in zine making in college, and I started college in 1999. So no, it has nothing to do with MAGA nothing, you self-centered low IQ retard. Has nothing to do with it. Zines have been around. I learned last night the first ever queer zine was produced in 1947. So, I bring this up because why is it that all of these college libraries have massive zine collections of leftist propaganda? Why is it that all these public libraries that are funded by the taxpayer have massive zine collections of leftist propaganda? It's because librarianship as a profession is completely compromised and probably has been for decades. And this is yet another thing that the right has dropped the ball on. Yet another thing. Because you know what? A couple of years ago, everyone was screaming about the president of the American Library Association being a Marxist, and she was. And I secretly recorded her at the Socialism Conference saying libraries should be sites of Marxist organizing. And everyone was like, we exposed the ALA for having a Marxist president. Guess what? The ALA today still has a Marxist president, and it's not the same one as a couple years ago, but she's still a non-binary Marxist. The conservatives got a couple state library associations to leave the ALA, but did that actually change libraries in those states? Because guess what? It wasn't the ALA that was pushing these things. It was librarianship as a profession. The ALA is not where the corruption started. The ALA was just the manifestation of the corruption. This is the same thing as teachers in public schools almost all being leftist because they went through the colleges of education that were almost completely captured by the socialist left decades and decades and decades ago. And then all the teachers came out communist, and then they all started teaching communist ideas in the classroom. And everyone wonders why. It's because the profession of teaching is completely corrupted. And P.S., the profession of library sciences is also completely corrupted. That is two taxpayer-funded professions that are completely corrupted. And P.S., these are the people that are responsible for educating your children. Librarians choose what resources are in the libraries and are made available to the communities. If librarians want libraries to be sites of Marxist organizing, which we know they do, then they stock the library with leftist propaganda in the form of zines. I see we already have a conservative retard in the chat. Have you ever even looked at a zine, Lacey? No, Karlyn, you don't understand. Librarians just want people to have access to information. They are very non-political, and they just want people to be able to do research. Lacey, have you ever even looked at a zine? Did you even know what zines were before you came to this stream tonight? Have you ever had one in your hands? Have you ever taken the time to read it? I will wait for your answer in the chat, and I do expect you to answer me in the chat. Guys, librarians are innocent, and they just want people to be able to do research. Oh, you're older than me? Oh, is this Jill? Oh, is this fat-ass Jill? How many people think this is fat-ass Jill? Hang on. Guess what, guys? Guess what? Oh, yup. There it is. Hi, Jill. Hi, fat-ass Jill. Every single time. Guys, we are being visited by the fat-ass that stalks me on every single stream that I do. Let's just remind ourselves who we're being visited by. I gotta find the screen. I gotta find the picture. Hang on. I just had to download it the other day, much to my chagrin. I don't really want that shit on my desktop, but I had to download it the other day to show people what she looks like again. Oh, where is it? Where is it? Can't find it. Well, you guys all know what she looks like. Everyone knows what fat ass Jill looks like. Everyone knows what fat ass Jill looks like. Dang. Do I feel like going and downloading it again? No, not really. No, not really. No, not really. Because we all know. Yep. Yeah, guys, this is definitely someone that just wandered in. Oh, yep. Okay, now I really am going to just go and download it. Now I really feel like people need to look at who we're actually talking to right now, which is a psycho fat ass that spends all of her time in her house because she's basically a shut-in. And she spends all of her time watching my streams and clipping them and making AI pictures of me and writing articles about me and spreading shit about me around the internet because she has nothing else to do. And we block all of her accounts when we find them. But, you know, fat ass Jill just has nothing to do but continuing to create more and more accounts on the internet. Hang on, getting the picture. Gotta remind everyone of who this is. And so every time, fat ass Jill is not the brightest crayon in the box, because every single time she comes onto the stream with a new name, she reveals herself so quickly because she has no impulse control, which I think we can all acknowledge based on her weight. You know, people call me fat on the internet, but damn. Ready to see who we're talking to? Oh, I should have just had the should have known. Should have just had the picture ready to go. This is who we're talking to. This is who this is. And as soon as we block this screen name, she will run off and she will create another one because this is all she does. And she's going to sit here all night and watch us. And she's going to see the entire time because she's so you know what the secret is about this fucking ridiculous person? This person wishes she could be a part of my community. She fucking wishes. Sadly, she's far too stupid, and she picked the wrong side from the very beginning. So if she hadn't been a raging psycho stalking me for 5 years, this woman has been stalking me. 5 fucking years. If she hadn't been a raging psycho from the beginning, then perhaps she would be part of this community today. You know, we don't really judge people. People are allowed to weigh whatever they want to weigh. They're allowed to put whatever food in their mouth they want. If she had just reined in the psychotic, perhaps she could have been a part of this community, but because she couldn't do it, she became an insane stalker, and now this is all she does, all day, every day. And so now we're going to block this account, and inevitably she's going to come back with another one. Bye, fat ass. Bye. What a great way to start off the day. See, and this is also how you know that people like her have no interest in actually solving the real problem. No interest. Did you see what that fat ass fucking psycho came in with? Karlyn, librarians are good people and they just want people to have access to pamphlets. They just want people to have it. She's like trying to convince you guys that this is not a real problem. And it's like, okay, we see what side you're on clearly, right? Tolkien fan, conservatives don't know what is actually going on. They continue to screw everything up while inadvertently helping the far left destroy society. Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? Hey, bro, guess what? No one's forcing you to be in my chat. You can leave, too. We're starting off with retard. Is this going to be retard night on the stream? Is it because we're talking about sex tonight? Is it going to be retard night in the chat? Oh, God, I hope not. I really hope not. But you know what? If it is retard night, we'll have to deal with it. Okay, so that's what's going on with the zines. You can find the live stream that I did about it over on the Substack. What They Never Told You About Marxist Librarians. I went into a little bit more in depth there, but zine research is one of the primary things I'm working on right now because I think this is kind of the key to the kingdom of understanding the historical evolution of the left, what ideas they're considering, what their language means, things like that. Because on this channel, unlike all the bullshit artists on Twitter, on this channel, we hinge into reality, and we actually care what people have to say. Do we have another one? Oh, your aunt was a librarian. I said libertarian. I thought you said libertarian. My aunt was a librarian and she's a complete psycho bitch from hell. Yes. Oh, it's a Groiper. Okay. Well, I'll be over to block you very soon, Groiper. So, relax. Hey, thank you, Matthew. I appreciate that. Chicago, one of the most socialist cities in the United States. So, speaking of people that are not hinged into reality, I have a point of personal privilege that we need to discuss before we get into our show. And it's a very sad point of personal privilege, but I've had enough, and I'm going to talk about it. So, I have been promoting someone for the past couple years named Stu Studio. Stu Studio used to do great work covering the far left. Really did. He would sign up for their presentations and he would record them and he would put them on YouTube, and then we would watch their presentations and he would come into the chat sometimes and talk to us about it and all this stuff. And it was actually, honestly, one of just the most really chill kind of I won't say collaborations, but he was providing good content. I used his content. I promoted him. I told my community to promote him. I never, ever, 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 ever said anything negative about Stu Studio. Well, a couple months ago, Stu Studio sold out. And I actually saw this coming. I thought this was going to happen. And it's really unfortunate. Listen, I understand how hard it is to be a person on the internet that operates independently, just trying to get this information about the left out there. I totally get it. However, I never sold out to any political bullshit con artist narrative building machine. Stu Studio did. A couple months ago, Stu Studio went to work for the Manhattan Institute. The Manhattan Institute is where famous other sellout, Christopher Rufo, set up his shop. It is funded by a Zionist named Paul Singer. The Manhattan Institute is an overtly Zionist, pro-Israel think tank. Now, Stu Studio has always been a Zionist. In fact, if Stu Studio forces me to do this because of his bullshit and nonsense, I will go back to one of the earliest streams that we did about Stu Studio's work. Because in that stream, in the chat, Stu Studio told us, this was about 2 years ago, he told us he was followed by Jonathan Greenblatt, who is the president of the ADL. And that struck me as odd at the time. I kind of filed that one away. But I am positive, if we go back and we look at the chat logs from the presentations, I think it was one of the University of Virginia presentations. I'm almost positive about it. I think if we go back and look in the chat logs, we are going to see Stu Studio talking about the fact that he was being followed by Jonathan Greenblatt. Now, Stu Studio had a very small account at the time. We're talking maybe 1,000 people following him at the time. It was a very, very, very small account. And that always kind of stood out to me. I was like, why the fuck is Jonathan Greenblatt following you? Because that's he's a very prominent, powerful person. Why is he following this random guy that doesn't even have that many followers, that is just starting out? That always seemed odd to me. Stu also called him Mr. Greenblatt in the chat. And that always kind of stuck with me, and I always filed that away. And so I always knew Stu was a Zionist, and I never held it against him because he was doing very good work. He was releasing clips. He was being very thoughtful and pragmatic about it. He was just reporting on what would happen. And I was like, you know what? Guess what? People can disagree. That's okay. Excuse me, Stu Studio is a song by Phil Collins. It is. It is. My donation today, Karlyn, your work and insight is absolutely priceless. Hey, I appreciate that too, ladies. But slowly over the course of really in the last several months. Honestly, I've been seeing this come from Stu Studio in the last several months. Over the last several months, Stu's analysis has gone from here is the facts and what happened and a clip of the recording to Here is a bullshit Zionist narrative. And I've watched this happen over and over and over and over and over again. And every single time I saw Stu release a tweet with a clip where he was overtly putting a Zionist pro-Israel spin on everything the left was doing, I kind of filed it away. I was like, I'm not going to make trouble. I'm not going to make trouble until I have something to make trouble about, okay? Again, people are allowed to have their opinions. I actually had a decent, I thought, decent relationship with Stu Studio. And so I was like, you know what? This is not a fight I'm going to have right this second. I like the clips that he's doing. Let's just focus on the clips. Well, today, Stu Studio releases a clip of Mahmoud Khalil talking at this Palestine conference. And in this spiel that he did, he said, "Why do we continue to allow him to stay in this country?" Now listen, Mahmoud Khalil is a communist. I am not on the side of Mahmoud Khalil. However, the reason that Stu Studio wants him deported is because Mahmoud Khalil is speaking against Israel. And I've seen him do this over and over and over and over and over again, and I've had enough. I've had enough of this. And so I responded to him, and I said, because supporting a foreign power should not be a deciding factor of who gets to stay in America with a legal green card? I'm sorry, guys. I have this crazy idea that if you have a legal green card to be in this country, and by the way, my husband has a green card to be in this country. He's currently going through the process of becoming a citizen, which is very exciting. My husband has finally started the citizenship process. That's taken a long ass time, but maybe I have a little skin in the game here. Not that my husband speaks out against anything, but if my husband posted a tweet that someone from Israel didn't like and that resulted in his deportation after he and I have been married for 14 years and he's been in this country legally the whole fucking time, and he just tweeted something that Israel didn't like, and that, like, I would be pretty effing pissed. So I responded, you know, maybe we shouldn't be arguing for the deportation of people who speak against Israel because this is America and we have free speech, motherfucker. Obviously, I was much nicer than that. And Stu Studio responded, Mahmoud Khalil literally supports Hamas! Which is actually not true. Again, this is just a bullshit Zionist narrative. We have watched the pro-Palestine protests. We know exactly why the left is engaging in the pro-Palestine protests. Because they perceive Israel to be the settler colonist oppressors who stole the land from the Palestinian. They are not pro-Hamas. That's not what this is about. They are not anti-Jewish. That has never been what this is about. And Stu Studio is lying about that. And the thing with Stu Studio is, he's watched enough of the leftist stuff now that he should absolutely know what the language means. He should absolutely know what it means. In fact, I know he does know what it means, and so he is proactively lying to his audience to spin them all up, to get clout and clicks on the internet by being pro-Israel. So he said that, and I responded, so he expressed opinions Israel doesn't like. Got it. You've watched enough of this material that you should absolutely know what the language means. You either learn nothing or you're shilling a narrative to the Zionists who pay you now from the Manhattan Institute. And what did Stu Studio respond with? This is how we know he sold out. You can't claim to be anti-communist and then shrug at a revolutionary leftist group, blah, 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 blah. Oh, really, Stu? Oh, really? I can't claim to be anti-communist and disagree with your obvious Zionist shilling for Israel? I've been doing this for years longer than you have, motherfucker. The minute someone goes down, Karlyn, you're obviously not an anti-communist. Go fuck yourself. Go fuck thyself. And this is when we know that he is not being intellectually honest at all, that he's willing to lie at the drop of a hat if he gets the most gentle of pushbacks. And I believe my pushback was pretty gentle. I could have been a lot harsher in my pushback. I reined it in, and I got told, you're not a real anti-communist. And then he said, you've been looking for internet drama with me since I joined. I can't say what you can say whatever you want about me. Blah 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 blah. I have done nothing but support Stu Studio for literally years. I have done nothing but tell my audience to amplify his work for literally years. And if people don't believe that, I've had enough of this shit. Stu Studio wants to spread the same old lie. Karlyn, you're just trying to create internet drama. I made a video of every single DM I ever had with this guy going back years, and people can look at those DMs and see that I have been nothing but supportive and cordial to him for literally years. And I was thanked for that by him lying about me on the internet. I fucking had it. I have had it. I have had it with this bullshit. I have a long track record of calling out people who I think are lying to shill a political narrative, and I'm not afraid to do it at all because I am 100% independently funded. I don't need anyone's fucking money to pay for my work. Unlike Stu Studio, I don't have to go make friends with Jonathan Greenblatt and then go grovel to the Manhattan Institute and then change my entire approach, going from reporting on the facts and what happened to shilling a Zionist political narrative for money. It is sellout and it is disgusting. And I don't need to lie about people who disagree with me. All I need to do is show the receipts. So he wants to pretend that I've ever been anything but supportive of him? Motherfucker, I was reining back criticism of you for months. I told my audience and my community not to criticize Stu and his obvious Zionist shilling for months and months and months, and now he wants to come out and say, you're obviously not an anti-communist? Yeah, the constant stabbing in the back from the Zionist shills. So here's my position. Stu Studio wants to play this game. Every single time I see Stu Studio doing obvious narrative shilling and lying to his audience, I'm picking apart his analysis from now on, and there ain't fuck off shit he can do about it. And I'm going to say this too. I've had enough with people lying about what's going on. I can't tell anyone what to do. You guys are all going to do what you want to do, but I'm not promoting his clips anymore, and I would strongly encourage everyone else to never promote his clips again. And if Stu Studio is making clips that we like, and he's making, because he's always made good clips. I got to give him that. He has always made good clips. But you know what? He wants to lie about me on the internet. You know what I'm going to do, Stu? Every single time, and I don't even care that I'm putting a recording on this. I will say exactly what I'm going to do on the internet, and then I will fucking do it. Every single time Stu Studio makes a clip that I like, that he is lying to his audience in his narrative about the clip, I'm stealing that clip, I'm taking his logo off it, I'm putting my logo on it, I'm putting the clip on the internet with the correct analysis. Yeah, you're right, Stu, I will steal your work. Just like people like you and people you support have been stealing my work for fucking years. I am so sick of trying to be above board with these people. I supported him for years. I amplified his work for years. I gave him credit for his work for years. I told everyone else to do it. He wants to lie about me on the internet. Okay, now we're going to steal all your clips. We're going to put my logo on them. We're going to put the correct analysis on them, and we're not going to apologize. And every time you fucking cry about it, I don't give a fuck because you're being paid by Zionist fucking assholes at the Manhattan Institute. So you lose nothing, Stu. Guess what? You lose not a single thing if we take your clips and put our logo on them and do the correct analysis because you're getting money from your Zionist masters either way, bro. I was one of the only people on the internet who was not stealing his clips and who was instead saying, go and promoting his work, give him credit, doing all this stuff. I have fucking had it. I have had it. If Stu Studio had a problem with me, he could have addressed it privately. He didn't have to publicly accuse me of not being a real anti-communist on the internet. So no more quarter. No more quarter for Zionist shills. None. I don't give a fuck. This is why we don't trust anyone outside of our circle. We don't trust anyone outside of our community. No more. Between Andy, No, and Stu, it's no mercy at all times. Yeah, no fucking mercy for people who are lying about what the left is doing. Because every single time someone like Stu Studio or someone like Andy No lies to his audience, and by the way, Andy No absolutely does know he's lying to his audience about that Catholic church shooter. I promise you that. Every single time one of these people lies, I'm going to be there to correct it. And if people don't like it, I don't give a fuck. My priority is to tell people the truth and to show people what's actually going on. It is not to push the narrative of the people who are paying me, because the people who are paying me are normal people who actually just want the truth. So, that's that. I'm not surprised. I'm just disappointed. I'm not surprised. I'm just disappointed. Anyway, do you guys want to watch some Kink? Do you guys want to watch some Kink and some sadism and some BDSM? Okay, we're not watching porn or anything. Calm down. But for the rest of Socialism Saturday, we are going to be watching this presentation from the City College of New York. The City College of New York did this presentation. This was, I guess, back in March. So this was several months ago at this point. And so this was a lecture series that they did called The Power of Leather. We have watched some clips from this series. By the way, this same series is the series where we expose them for, well, they had a kink workshop about bootlicking. And if you missed the clip, I accidentally took myself off the stage. If you missed the clip, if you missed the clips from the Kink workshop about bootlicking, you can find that over on my Substack. That is Karlyn, Karlyn.substack.com. The clip title is Exposing the City University of New York for hosting a BDSM Kink workshop. You can also find the video of the full workshop with the corrected audio, because the audio sucked a little bit last time. As a reminder, guys, if you want to support the work I'm doing, because I am 100% funded by people like you, head over to the Substack, sign up for $8 a month, $80 a year. You guys keep me in business. I've got a couple undercover things I'm going to be doing pretty soon. Actually, one really exciting one coming up in relatively soon. So if you want to make it possible for me to tell you the truth and to bring you the receipts and not to put any fucking narrative shilling around it, head over to the Substack, sign up. You guys piss off Zionists when you fund my work. Zionists are never more pissed off than when people like me, who they look down on, have clips that directly contradict every bullshit story that they try to tell. So, I would appreciate that. Guys, before we get into the video, we do have rules for Socialism Saturday. This is not a normal stream. We do treat this like a classroom. Please pay attention to this short video where the rules will be explained to you about how you're expected to behave in my stream. Hang on. Where's my rules video? Here it is. All right, for anyone that's new, we have some rules for Socialism Saturday. Let me go over them real quick. Socialism Saturday is a research group and a class. We do take this seriously. You're allowed to have fun. You're allowed to have a drink or two. You're allowed to kind of kick back and joke in the chat. However, I need everyone to understand that when we are researching the radical revolutionary left, we do take this seriously. And so if you're shitposting in my chat, I'm going to tell you to stop. If you are posting off topic in the chat, I'm going to ask you to stop at some point, because it's going to be distracting to what we're doing. I need you to think of yourself as in a classroom. And I'm not talking about an online classroom. I'm talking about a real life classroom, okay? When you walk into a real life classroom, I am the teacher, you are the students. You are sitting in the desk, I am sitting in the front of the classroom. I'm standing there teaching you what is going on. If you were in a real life classroom, you wouldn't walk in, start throwing shit at the wall, yelling, saying, I disagree with you because my best friend said something different. That's not allowed. I don't care about your feelings. I'm not going to coddle your opinion. And that's going to be the way it is. And if you don't like it, you don't have to be here. But if you are in my classroom, you will respect my rules and you will listen to me. And if you do not do that, then you will be removed. And how you feel about being removed makes no difference to me at all. The expectation is if you're going to be here and you're going to be watching Socialism with us and you're going to be participating in the chat, you are doing it because you are serious about learning this topic and understanding this topic. The minute that I think that you're just fucking around or you're trolling or something like that, you're going to get put in a timeout or permanently banned, and that's just going to be the way it is. Rule number 2, don't be a dick. Do not insult me. Do not insult other people in the chat. I can do whatever I want because I am the queen fascist bitch of my YouTube channel. So I can say and do whatever I want. But if you don't insult me and you don't insult other people in the chat, we're not going to have a problem. So be an adult, rein that shit in. Number 3, no whining. I don't care about your feelings. I don't care if you feel personally attacked. It makes no difference to me at all. And I promise you, I care about your feelings a little bit more than the left does. So if you can't handle me, you can't handle the left. If you start whining and complaining because you don't like the rules or you think you're being treated unfairly, you can just leave, bro. There's the door. You don't have to be here. Number 4, listen. Our job here and why we do Socialism Saturday is to listen to what the left is saying, to listen to what real leftists are doing in the real world. This is not to support your confirmation bias. This is not to support any conservative bullshit narrative that you may have heard on Glenn Beck that one time. This is not to be what you want it to be. This is to engage with reality. We need to listen, we need to actively listen, and we need to understand the left better than they understand themselves. That is the purpose of this exercise, okay? As part of that, I do ask that people refrain from debunking. You do not have a single debunk in your arsenal about the left is stupid because of reasons X, Y, B, and Z, or the left is her hypocrites for reasons X, Y, B, and Z. You don't have a single debunk that we haven't heard before, okay? And every time you put energy into debunking, that is energy that you're not putting into listening. So if I see you debunking, I'm going to tell you to stop because you need to put that energy into listening instead. Lastly, break the rules of my chat or disrespect me in any way, and I'll just kick you out, and that's the way it is. All right, everyone, those are the rules of the chat. We do have a super chat goal on Socialism Saturdays of $100, which is a pretty nominal fee, I think. If you appreciate the work I'm doing, showing you presentations no one else on the internet is showing you, breaking down the language, stuff like that, please feel free to send in a super chat, $5 super chat, $10 super chat, $100 super chat, $500 super chat. That would be really great because I'm funded by people like you, and I would appreciate it. Hey, Bill. On a lighter note, I'm glad everyone liked the aristocratic utensil video dragging James Lindsay the other day. I loved it. I thought it was so good. I'd never heard of that guy. I really do appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Of course, I always appreciate videos dragging James Lindsay. They're always fun to watch on the channel. Look at that. We're almost halfway to the goal. The sooner we meet the super chat goal, the much less likely I am to yell during the stream. If you've never watched Socialism with us before, it might be overwhelming for you to see Socialism for the first time. I highly encourage everyone to ask questions. If they're saying something that you don't understand, there's no shame in asking questions because we were all new at this once. As a reminder, socialists do use our same vocabulary, but they don't use our dictionary. So they have different meanings for the words than we do. So if you have questions about what they're saying, please put them in the chat and we will try to answer them. But yeah, that's it. All right, let's get started. We have a long way to go. See, I feel like your attitude has been adjusted since I put you in a 5-minute time. What are you doing here? What, like, you're from Big Tech's audience. What are you doing here? I don't want any trouble, okay? I don't want any nonsense. Let's get started.
Seeking to deny them access to health care and block paths to citizenship and public life. And extinguish opportunities.
We gotta go back to the beginning. That was not the beginning. Go back to the beginning, video. Why is it at the end? Oh no. Oh no. YouTube's already screwing up. We're 30 seconds into the stream. No! Go back. All I want you to do is go back to the beginning. There we go. Okay.
What a gorgeous crowd. Look at this group. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. It is CLAG's, the Center for LGBTQ Studies, pleasure to welcome Yin Q and Dr. Aki Sakatwolo.
Sound gets better, don't worry.
Tonight to discuss exigent sadism. The event will be moderated by CLAG's board member, Cassandra Sparks. We want to thank everybody for being here. I have a few words to say about CLAGs. They're important at this time.
There it goes.
On January 20th, 2025, an ongoing problem was made worse. Historically disenfranchised people were targeted by a series of executive orders
Oh no.
seeking to deny them access to health care and block paths to citizenship and public life, and extinguish opportunities for participation in the workforce and in higher education. Singled out and forced to bear the brunt of the new administration's exclusionary policies are transgender and non-binary people, immigrants, refugees, and undocumented individuals and families, and racial and ethnic minorities. In addition to attacking vulnerable and marginalized people, the administration is dismantling institutional support for equity initiatives. CLAGS, the Center for LGBTQ Studies, the first university-based LGBTQ resource center in the US, adds its voice to the chorus of voices challenging these attacks. We reaffirm the humanity of the people being dehumanized and shown no mercy by the architects of last week's chilling presidential orders.
Stunning and brave.
The political attacks launched on Tuesday are personal to us at CLAGS. We are, and we think along with, transgender and non-binary scholars. We are, and we teach and learn from, undocumented students and immigrant students. We are, and we organize for Black, Indigenous, and people of color community members. And so CLAG speaks out, resisting the false narratives and the dangerous and even deadly implications of the recent executive orders that trade in reductive biological determinism, xenophobia, and colorblind cynicism. No human truth about gender,
Hang on.
national belonging, or race.
Pop quiz for the chat. Has he said anything to indicate anything about white skin color? Anything? We hinge into reality here. You might not like this, but we are not doing this bullshit. Has he said anything about white skin color at all? I'm allowing the chat to answer so they can tell you off. Nope, nothing about white skin color. Nothing about white skin color. Nope, 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 nope. Whiteness means capitalism. Nope, 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 nope. Nothing. Nothing about white skin color. Literally, they haven't said anything about it. We don't make shit up here. Don't make shit up again on my channel. You think you're being funny, but you're not.
Can be found there. In fact, only when people are so poorly understood or so intentionally misrecognized can they be so easily dismissed.
Yeah, exactly.
CLAGS offers opportunities to learn more. Tonight is one of those opportunities. We appreciate your being here. And in this moment, when LGBT studies itself is under attack, we especially ask for your support. You can support us in a couple ways tonight. If you could, spare a few dollars, you can go to clags.org and you'll see a donate button, clags.org. We really appreciate it. Small donations
The person speaking is white.
Or
this person's white.
More happily,
this person's
on the table
white.
outside, as you
Pretty sure
leave,
this
you will
person's
see
white too.
10
Even the
signed
sign language
copies
interpreter's
of
white.
book. And you'll see tote bags with 2 books in them. They collect all of the Kessler lectures. The Kessler lecture is given by it's a Lifetime Achievement Award in LGBT scholarship. And this year we celebrated the 32nd annual Kessler Award. For $50, you can get Avi's signed book, and for $75, you can get the 2 CLAGS books that come in a very sexy CLAGS tote bag
A sexy
that is
tote
mesh
bag.
on the back. I think that is the best introduction to exigent sadism.
Yeah.
Please try to give us a few dollars tonight. Of course, all of our
Yes,
events are free and open
correct.
to the public. Our informal mantra at CLAGS is we believe in free, accessible LGBTQ studies for everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you to our panelists. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, Matt. And shout out to CLAGS for letting us host this event. And this, yeah. And this series this year, I mean, especially in this moment and in this climate, CLAGS has supported these conversations happening in their space and with their resources. And I'm incredibly grateful to them for that. And thank you all for being here today. My name is Cassandra Sparks. I'm a PhD candidate in sociocultural anthropology at UC Berkeley. I'm one of the co-organizers of the Power of Leather series, along with Laura Westengard. And I am thrilled to introduce you to our two speakers tonight for the third event in our Power of Leather series, Exigent Sadism. So Yin Q is a parent, writer, and core organizer and curator, organizing with Red Canary Song and founding member of Kink Out. Yin's writing has been published in Bust, Apogee Journal, We Too, Stories of Sex Work and Survival, and Afro-Asia.
Steve-O! In with the big super chat. Hell, Karlyn, enjoyed your stream of Sargon the other day. I concur the drastic actions have to have a hope to stop the left. Hey, I appreciate that, Steve-O. Thank you for the super chat. Look, now I have to be in a good mood for the rest of the stream because we met our goal so early. I want everyone to know you can still send me money. If you feel so inclined, if you feel driven by the Holy Spirit to continue to throw in for the Super Chat Fund, I would really appreciate it. But hey, isn't that nice? Now I have to be nice to you guys for the rest of the stream. It's really awful and it's horrible and I don't want to do it, but I will try my very best to not yell as much as possible. Unless you say this is about white people, and if you say this is about white people or white skin color, I will then yell at you.
Media work includes Mercy Mistress, an autobiographical pilot based on their experience as a dominatrix, and Fly in Power, a documentary for Red Canary Song.
Look at this! Look at this! No sooner had I said, I'm gonna yell at you if you talk about white people, we already have a retard. He was already shouting, Karlyn's typing monkeys are trained well, but pointing out that people are promoting anti-white policies, blah, 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 blah. Bro, you know how I read this? You like to make shit up because you like to be a poor victim of the world, because you're no different than all of the other poor victims of the world, and you feel like you need to make shit up that is unhinged from reality so that you can be the ultimate victim of the world. We don't put up with this shit here. You're obviously not smart enough to be here, and now you're permanently banned. Bye! Bye! We don't make shit up here. Bye! Permanently banned. Bye!
Yin has brought sex worker art activations to Leslie Lohman Museum, MoMA PS1, Performance Space New York, Brown University, and Storefront Gallery for Art and Architecture. Dr. Avgi Sakitopoulou is a Cypriot and Greek immigrant and practicing psychoanalyst. She is the author of Sexuality Beyond Consent, Risk, Race, and Traumatophilia, co-author of Gender Without Identity, and completing a manuscript on the currents of sadism and the thirst traps of trauma.
The thirst traps of trauma?
This is going to be a great crowd. Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you. Shout out to Felice for interpreting many of our events this series. Today, we are going to be talking about things many of you in this room know, but might not want to talk about. The three of us want to take a risk with you all.
Wearing a mask.
To think critically about some attachments many of us hold dear, like consent, healing, and safety. And also to speak candidly about some aspects of leather sex that can feel too risky to speak aloud.
Leather sex.
Abject experiences that are not negotiated, nor even exactly desirable, but nonetheless profoundly erotic. Those moments when we engage one another through ambivalent emotions like anger or hurt. Edgy encounters that stage and beckon traumatic memories without healing us from them. And moments in which we find ourselves called to surrender to our own darkness, not knowing where that might lead. Avgi shared with Yin and me that in her experience, there's no way to talk about exigent sadism without performing exigent sadism.
Oh,
so
no.
You might experience this event as a sadistic encounter. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it will be erotic, though for some that might be the case. Pedagogy, teaching can be sadistic when it takes aim at our attachments and investments, threatening to crack them open and leave us transformed. Of course, for pedagogy to be transformative, not to mention erotic, you must be open to receiving it as such. And we invite you to remain open. We invite you to notice moments when you feel the impulse to defend something that feels dear, to latch on to something you feel you know that might now be under attack, to rationalize sensations that feel uncomfortable, and perhaps most importantly for this crowd, to notice yourself, notice if you feel yourself jumping to narratives of healing or empowerment or liberation instead of staying with a state of uncertainty for a bit longer. And with that, I want to turn it to Yin, who's going to be reading a selection from the memoir they're working on, Dim Sum and S&M.
You're open but not ready, Dragon Balls. Me neither. I'm not ready neither. I'm not ready. I'm not receptive.
Hello, and thank you, Cass. Thank you, Laura, for opening spaces in academia for sex workers and queer leather folks. And thank you to CLAGS and CUNY for hosting Kink Out and myself. I want to wish everyone a sound Lunar New Year as we enter the year of Snake and evoke metamorphosis. I am so honored to be part of this triangulated conversation with Avi and Cassandra. I was introduced to Avi's writing years ago in a Kink reading group. Many dominatrixes are nerds in leather. We are constantly trying to define our BDSM quest because the practice of kink is the constant questioning of the body, the mind, the taboo, erotic, the abject, and the mundane, as well as the complication of sex work, power, and capitalism.
Yo!
Many of us wrestle with internal
Winner. I win the internet. Capitalism mentioned within the first 10 minutes of the presentation. I win the internet again. Everyone say I was right in the chat. This is always about capitalism. Always. First 10 minutes. I have to clip that. It's awesome. The whole opening of that was great. I win again. Hang on. I'm just going to clip the whole intro to that. Oh no, clipping tool, no, don't do this to me, clipping tool. I know I used you a lot today, but you need to clip right now. You need to just clip the thing. That's it. That's all I need you to do is clip the damn clip. Come on. No. Am I going to have to go back and clip this later? I might have to go back and clip it later. My clipping tool doesn't want to work. Fuck me hard. God damn it. One more try, and then we're going to watch it again. Nope, clipping tool's not working today. All right, that's fine. I'll go clip it later. Karlyn W, as always. Yeah. Where'd the sound go? Oh.
Thank you, Cass. Thank you, Laura, for opening spaces in academia for sex workers and queer leather folks. And thank you to CLAGS and CUNY for hosting Kink Out and myself. I want to wish everyone a sound Lunar New Year as we enter the year of Snake and evoke metamorphosis. I am so honored to be part of this triangulated conversation with Avi and Cassandra. I was introduced to Avi's writing years ago in a Kink reading group. Many dominatrixes are nerds in leather. We are constantly trying to define our BDSM quest because the practice of kink is the constant questioning of the body, the mind, the taboo, erotic, the abject, and the mundane, as well as the complication of sex work, power, and capitalism. Many of us wrestle with internalized and assaultive projections of racialized sexuality, gender binaries, and trauma.
Gender binaries?
Avi's writings are so thrilling because she's not giving us easy answers, which is very tease and denial. But her work is steering us with generative questions and exquisite concepts that fold and unfold like continuous origami. I know Cassandra Sparks as a thoughtful and steadfast community organizer.
Probably will be.
And
I appreciate you watching that.
For disruption, and she has been assisting and urging me to write my memoir, sometimes in a very stern, very enjoyable manner.
Yo.
I will be reading about a memory that is a deep wound, a scene that involves needles. I invite you to take a deep breath when I tell you to, but if you don't consent, that's fine. Don't breathe.
I feel like I shouldn't be listening to this.
I hold a 16-gauge surgical needle over V's chest, a long steel thorn, both imposing and slight. As I move my legs to straddle over his waist.
Hang on. We're going to listen to the softcore porn, or perhaps hardcore porn in a second, but someone has a question, and so questions take priority over the porn. Does the left think about vanilla sex as being under capitalism? For example, a normal heterosexual couple, even if they may still engage in certain kinks amongst themselves? Yeah, I mean, so yes, but so in your example, it would be the normal heterosexual couple that would be the problem, because monogamy for them is a form of propertied relationships. And by the way, if it was a gay relationship, 2 men or 2 women, it would also be the same problem, because they consider monogamous relationships to be propertied forms of relationships. Whereas you got to remember, when they're participating in kink and they're participating in leather, oftentimes for them, that takes place in public. So a lot of the early queer activists and gender activists, they were involved in things like the leather scene and the BDSM scene in like San Francisco, where they would go into these BDSM clubs and they'd participate in essentially public sex and all of that stuff. So it's not even just that it's about it's not just about like vanilla sex versus kink. It's about bringing sex into the public. That's one of the things they do, is that's queering sex or whatever. So it's about I guess I should maybe say it this way, and if someone else has a better way to explain it in the chat, sex for them it's like anti-procreation, anti-normative family, anti-propertied relationship. So it's like they're having sex in public with multiple people, doing all of this crazy kinky stuff as a political statement against the capitalist forms of propertied relationships. Does that make sense? Things like marriage, they don't like marriage. They don't like gay marriage either. They don't like monogamy. They prefer polyamory over monogamy. Things like that. Hope that answered your question.
Needle over V's chest, a long steel thorn, both imposing and slight. As I move my legs to straddle over his...
Hang on. Sorry. We also got a super chat from Matthew that I missed. So thank you, Matthew, for the support. Opinions, please. Since over 30% of OnlyFans is now AI generated, what's going to happen to sex workers in the future? I have no idea. Listen, man, I hate porn. I hate all this stuff. I think it's destructive to the human spirit, honestly. So I kind of hope that it all goes away. I kind of hope that AI porn kills like real people doing this stuff. Even if they're still porn, I still think that's a step in the right direction. Is like people, I think people should be able to do whatever they want with their bodies. I personally just find it to be distasteful and wrong. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I guess we'll see. And to be honest, AI porn is probably going to end up taking over, because with AI porn, you can literally make it whatever you want. So why wouldn't that take over?
I hold a 16-gauge surgical needle over V's chest, a long steel thorn, both imposing and slight. As I move my legs to straddle over his waist, my other hand clutches the base of V's throat, squeezing just enough to slow time through the density of his breaths. Both clad in leather pants, our skins rub, creases grip. My clit piercing lands on mark. My belt buckle digs into my navel as I lean into the choke, the pressure not altogether uncomfortable. The smell of moist pits and tannins and candle wax fills my nostrils. I release the pressure on V's neck, and he drinks in the thick air. Our faces are intimately close. Lips are open, but we never kiss, not ever. The tension held between us, a short but immeasurable space, was a negotiation, a power we each, top and bottom, owned. Sadomasochism threads the space between hunger and protocol, desire and denial. I pull away slowly, as if putty stretched between us. I've already prepared V's chest with brown swipes of iodine to medically cleanse the skin and to mark the path of needles.
What the fuck?
Grasping a bare 2 centimeters of fascia between my left thumb and forefinger, the needle is ready to push through one side of the epidermal ridge to the other. Take a deep breath, in through your nose, and let it out slowly through your mouth. A forced but controlled exhale to stoke intention. When I push the needle in, I want you to continue this breath. Imagine a new opening to press in that desire. On the exhale, push out what no longer serves you through the other side. V has heard me say this many times before, but he still listens as the words hold new meaning. His eyelids close to take it in and then
I don't
opens
like this.
wide on the exhale. When I release my pinch, the skin by his collarbone flattens, but the needle remains, both ends visible. The steel shaft tunnels under, the barrel on one side, bevel on the other. 1 in, 49 to go.
49
Preparing for the
needles!
next piercing, V looks into my eyes with an intensity that almost makes my own waver, but I meet their brown-eyed gaze and smirk lest this ritual lose its erotic humor. V's shaved head is slick with sweat. I also feel trails of perspiration running down my neck and under the curve of my breasts, which are bound in tight halter. We don't know it yet, but this will be our last kink ritual together. I inhale, then exhale, pushing in. V asked for 50 needles across his chest, and I am delighted to pincushion him into an altered state of consciousness. The first few needles are slow, lining across the clavicles and spreading downward. We breathe in sync, and then I follow V's rhythm, rapidly piercing when his endorphins are cresting, slowing when we hit a tender point. Soon the needles, so many, glitter across V's skin like scales or spikes of a prehistoric animal, covering the sternum over his lungs that once housed a tumor the size of a golf ball. We are at Switch, a queer kink party at Loy Cachet, a professional kink house in Midtown Manhattan that takes up a whole floor of the commercial building. There are sounds of leather and hands smacking flesh, rubber gloves snapping at the wrist. Yelps and moans and laughter, raucous, giddy laughter drift over the music. The latest Massive Attack album, one song in particular, Teardrop, is on rotation.
I feel like I'm on pins and needles, no
on
pun
the CD
intended.
player, or possibly in my head. My submissive partner and I are entangled on a leather canopy bed in the back room. In place of a fabric tester, a mirror is hung above. V's eyes flicker to my face, then to the mirror image of our bodies, experiencing our placing both in his body and as voyeur. We know this flutter between perceptions, even when there is no mirror. As queer, Asian, and perceived as female, we both wrestle with the interior and social experiences of our bodies. Sometimes it takes meditation and concentrated breathing to settle into one's own skin. Sometimes it takes needles to pin yourself down. This is a moment of many moments as each needle goes in, stitching a quilt of intention and flesh. This is more than fucking, it's becoming. And with every needle, a spell cast for each of us.
Yeah, for real. Okay, someone needs to get Jennifer. They're talking about casting a spell by doing a BDSM fucking kink ritual at a sex club. Someone needs to get Jennifer immediately.
Sober, and yet I remember feeling as if I was floating, not through the usual high of sadism that I knew well through work and play. I felt as if I was flitting between time and selves. I pushed the next needle in, then the next. V is riding the waves. 20 or so needles in, and I'm saying something, repeating a sentence that doesn't make sense to me. It's not part of a session script or an unusual well-paced, erotic voice. I'm whispering high and frantic. V reaches out to grasp my arm, and I quiet myself so he doesn't have to take care of me while submitting to a ritual intended to strengthen his will, as he will face a month of quarantine and marrow transfusions. Breathe in. Exhale.
Wait. Did she just say that he's like getting cancer treatment? This is the last kink ritual they're doing before he gets cancer treatment? Bro, This is a college. This is a public taxpayer funded college. Why are we listening to a lecture about a kink ritual?
I push the needle in and feel V's hand still on my arm, but my limb feels like it's grown, extended past its skin. Please don't die. Please don't leave me. No longer said aloud, but the words sing in my head with the song lyrics. Love, love, please don't verb. Love is a fearless doing. Gentle impulsion, don't leave me. Breathe in, exhale. I merge and feel I am both V's body and my own, the masochist and the sadist, and I am the needle puncturing time. Breathe in. The years spin backwards. I am 19, pushing a syringe needle loaded with heroin into my best friend's thigh. A small dosage for me, an addict, but just to maintain. But she's never injected before. I don't know that she's already high on pills. Her eyes dilate and Bianca grins, asks if I would make love to her, and I do, moving my mouth down her brown belly, parting her thighs, kissing folds of skin, lost in her large body and soft moans until we fall asleep to dope dreams, dark and heavy. Breathe in, exhale. I wake the next day and her lips are blue. I try to resuscitate, but black bile erupts into my mouth. A dank odor permeates my
She
bedroom.
killed
I'm
someone?
not crying. I won't cry for years. I'm whispering, please don't die. Please don't leave me. But she's already gone, and I will chase Bianca for years. Breathe out. And time spins again.
Wow.
Metal flesh hooks puncture deep into layers of fascia on 8 points of my chest and back. Jute cord tethers me to a tree in Northern California, the Wetchpec lands of the Yurok Native Americans, where the sun floods over my naked body as I am suspended in light and sounds of drumming. Cleo Dubois and Fakir Musafar, elders of the San Francisco Bay leather community, have speared and hoisted me. I've placed my journal on an altar. The book is filled with prayers I had written to make amends with ghosts, that this incredible pain may burn off years of terrors and grant me flight towards life. I am begging myself through the dense and searing agony, but hours later, my feet on the ground, if not my mind, I write in my journal the same words I wrote after skydiving. I don't want to do that ever again.
I can't imagine why. I can't imagine why. Hang on, we got a super chat from about holy. I feel like I'm interrupting something with the super chat, but you know, the super chat takes part. Holy shit. In my opinion, as AI takes over porn, what are women who relied on such supposed to do? You know what? Women who made money with their bodies doing OnlyFans are going to have to get a real fucking job. I don't have any sympathy. I have literally no sympathy for women who chose to do OnlyFans over using their fucking brains. I have no sympathy at all. They're gonna have to get a real fucking job. Too bad. So sad. Welcome to life.
Needles upon needles, I sought for years to push in or pull out my yearn, and sometimes passive, sometimes active pursuit for death. I was so addicted to its lure and promise to alleviate memories of screaming and hitting, silence and neglect, rapes of body and home, and the quotidian loneliness of life within skins. My ritual with V was a celebration of the body's presence, similar to traditions of body modification or rituals of endurance performed by religious and cultural ceremonies worldwide, using pain to reclaim or insist the body's survival, tapping into the pharmaceuticals of our own brains, teasing the edges of death, and therefore,
Thank you.
erotic. The needles joined us, V and myself, in a shared glory of the repulsive, our assenting to life to the point of death, the needles signifying and laying claim to where cancer grew for the taking. What I had not planned or foresaw was that the needle, a puncture repetitive in my life, would open me as well, digging into old wounds, tearing up scar tissue of memories. I don't mean to imply that those scenes played through like a movie flashback as I've written them here. But similar to the omniscience that psychedelics or ecstatic rituals may grant, the rituals of kink can sometimes open an awareness through my body, not just of past time, but also into a future which my body ceases to exist. Breathe in, exhale. We are done. I sit and V's dark eyes bring me back into the room. I slide off the bed, my tight boots weighing my feet to the ground. Taking a long gulp of cold water, I retain a sliver of melted ice in my mouth before letting its sharp tingle sled down my throat. I hold V steady to rise from the bed to standing. We walk slowly to another mirror, floor length, so he can stretch and watch the armor of needles ripple and flex with movement. We grin at one another's image, the four of us, as if our tribe has already won. The needle is a vampire fang, a prayer, an absurdity. As much as the needle is death, it is also love.
The needle is death, and wow, I can't. Thank you for the gifted channel membership. Who got that gifted channel membership? Sam got it. Congratulations, Sam, and thank you for You know what? Complex PTSD, this is the perfect time. I think I have PTSD from that opening talk. Yeah, maybe that person might be system gender. That's right, exactly. Look, this is at CUNY, guys. The podium says Graduate Center. This is the Graduate Center at CUNY.
I mean, this is like so much of the poignancy and the intimacy of BDSM and Kink. So thank you.
Look at her arm. She's got socialist tattoos on her arm.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
I'm very overwhelmed actually by this event. It's like quite something to see a term you've put together produce this kind of gathering. So I'm like a little bit freaked out.
You're freaked out.
Thank you. I'm going to get to this. Okay. So I want to start with thanking Cassandra and Laura for making space to explore the currents of sadism here. While masochism has enjoyed a lot of academic attention, thinking about sadism has been very sparse, or rather, sadism is either reflexively understood as a destructive force, which is what I'll call destructive sadism, or in some BDSM as a benign simulation of sadism, which I've called sensible sadism for that reason. I mean, there's some irony in that, but I think that our discussion will show us that, that there's no way. It's very hard to get away from sensible sadism and thinking about kink, and yet I think it's very necessary. As a series of talks that straddles leather sex, sadomasochism, and leather culture with academia, Power of Leather has been really nourishing to me. I wish I had it when I was younger. I'm very excited for those of you who have it as you're younger or any stage of your lives. It's amazing to see people in leather, in kink wear. And at this particular political moment of breakdown, the assault on trans people, reproductive rights, the immigration crackdowns, and after having been made to watch a live stream genocide that we have been forced to fund, amidst all this, I would argue that doing radical queer work is actually very critical to nourishing our appetite for resistance. So many thanks to Cassandra and Laura, who has their birthday today. So happy birthday. And is still here.
Yeah, she just implied they're wearing kink wear in the audience. She did, yeah.
For conceiving this series, which I see to be as much about sexuality and kink as it is about politics and the revolutionary spirit. Thank you for inviting me. Much gratitude.
Wait, what did she just say? This is as much about sexuality and kink as it is about politics and the revolutionary spirit. What did I tell you? Queer Marxists see kinky sex and BDSM and all of these things where they're doing consensual power plays as political acts. Listen. This is part of their political identity. Like, really think about that. It is part of their political identity to participate in kink and BDSM.
And he's still here. for conceiving this series, which I see it to be as much about sexuality and kink as it is about politics and the revolutionary spirit. Thank you for inviting me. Much gratitude to Clags for hosting To Kink Out for well existing in our world and sustaining the kink community. And much admiration to Yin, who I am so thrilled to be on the same stage with tonight. Okay. A colleague I call Imani.
Hang on,
in my
I missed
book
a
is-
super chat from Dragon Balls. Dragon Balls, thank you for the super chat. Elements of that skin join part between the two of them mimic the new body horror film Together, which seems to be pushing... Really? There's a horror movie talking about the gender binary? See, I don't pay attention to what movies come out anymore. I'm going to look into that. Thank you, Dragon Balls. I appreciate it.
Playing with her 4-year-old daughter. I want to give us some concepts with which we might work tonight.
Well,
she's playing with her.
Okay, actually, let me actually address this. College level non-assimilation. So here's the thing. So this might seem counterintuitive. Far left activists are actually against the college and the university as an institution. Now, that might seem weird because you look at colleges and you think colleges are controlled by the left. Why would the left be against the college and the university as an institution? The faculty and the students are the revolutionary socialists. The administration, the people who actually run the college, the presidents, the vice presidents, the people who run the departments, they are assimilationists. And so there's a constant kind of war at colleges where you've got the faculty and the students being basically in open combat with the administrators because the faculty and the students are anti-assimilationist and they believe the leaders and the administrators are pushing colleges as an institution that perpetuate capitalism because they think the job of colleges is to churn out students that can then go into the workforce. So it's not that all colleges are anti-assimilation, but the faculty and the students are anti-assimilation, and that is in direct conflict with the administration. And this is why you see with the student protests and the encampments, this is why you see the student protesters constantly fighting with the administration. And which side does the faculty take? They take the student side every time because they're arguing the anti-assimilationist ideology where the administration is arguing the pro-assimilationist ideology.
4-year-old daughter, Lumi, be the monster. Lumi instructs her, and Imani instantly transforms herself into a monster and leaps forward. She snatches Lumi, she growls menacingly. Lumi squirms from within Imani's grip, squealing with delight. She fights back, she's giggling in abandon, and then suddenly she says, "Stop." And Imani stops. And then, again, she commands anew. And Imani starts again. Stop, again. They rehearse the scenario for a bit. And then Lumi looks unsatisfied and she says, "We'll play a different game. Now, this time, I tell you to be the monster, you grab and scare me, I say stop, but this time you don't stop." "I don't?" Imani hesitates. "No," Lumi says confidently. "What if it gets too much?" Imani asks anxiously. But Lumi doesn't care about this adult question of safety. "You have to not stop," she says, "or else it won't work." In this first segment, a negotiation occurs that directs the game and that makes the starting and stopping explicit. Imani follows Lumi's instructions and things proceed well. Insofar as she scripts the encounter, Lumi decides what it looks like, how far it goes, and when it stops. Imani, however, is not only following Lumi's instructions. For the play to work as it's supposed to, she also has to be inventive and imaginative. She has to bring something of her own to it. The game, that is, has to be both real and not real, insofar as Imani has to perform her growls and grabs monstrously enough for Lumi to be at least startled, even somewhat scared the play is real. But it is also not real in the sense that she becomes a monster and stops being one on command. This exchange is enacted with delicate attunement and is thus in the sphere of playful, well-regulated interactions. It has a rhythm and an emotional pace that rouses. It's exciting, but it's manageable. In this first part, we might say that the dyad operates under the rubric of affirmative consent, clear, precise, and consciously ambivalent communication that aims to yield the desired outcome by outlining what was and what was not permitted. Affirmative consent sees consent as issuing from a subject who is fully transparent to herself, good luck with that, and who thinks consciously and decides rationally to anticipate the probable effects of her assent. Things, however, take a turn. When Lumi asks Imani to override Lumi's will in a future moment when Lumi will be asking her to stop. So from the temporal perspective, the new game is non-linear. Lumi is preemptively authorizing Imani to disregard her command to stop, which Lumi anticipates that she will make, but directs Imani now to ignore later. And this is in part what makes this temporally scrambled request risky. How can Imani be sure that when the time comes, Lumi will still want her prospective no to be superseded? How will she know the precise point at which Lumi's softer stop will crystallize into a hard one if words cannot be trusted? In Lumi's new game, neither her consent to be trespassed nor the consent solicited of Imani are of the affirmative sort. They differ in several ways. The stopping point is not explicit, the communication has built-in vagueness, the game has no precise aim. If the game is to proceed, Imani has to both embrace the impulses that are animated in her to play the game, but also keep them in check. This is not affirmative consent. Let us call it limit consent, to mark how it comes close to the limit of what can go wrong and what's bearable. Limit consent does not center on reproducing a previous experience of satisfaction, but instead works to facilitate novelty and surprise. And in contrast to its affirmative counterpart, it hinges not on respecting limits, but on transgressing them. It comes dangerously close to the line of something going wrong. So why bother at all? Why play with fire? I mean, this crowd. But still, because limit consent can enable the pursuit of a particular kind of state that I have called overwhelm, using the word as a noun rather than in its usual.
Do you want to know why the left wins? Because our culture teaches people that if it's not entertaining, then it's not worth watching. And most of what the left does is simply not entertaining. Most of what the left does is dry and academic. And they say everything they're doing and they say all the quiet parts out loud, but they're not entertaining you, and it's not cut up into something with zooms and special effects and all that and a 30-second package that can go viral on the internet. Someone was asking in the chat earlier, why hasn't this gone viral on the internet? This will never go viral on the internet. It's too long. People won't watch it. And so the left operates completely unopposed because people who claim to care about defeating the left can't sit through a single presentation without getting bored and complaining that they're bored. And so this is why they win, and this is why we lose. And so, for what it's worth,
adjectival form, overwhelm is a dysregulated state that is not necessarily self-destructive, but it does court risk, and therefore it could become traumatic. It is a driven state that mostly issues from within an attuned dyad, but goes beyond it. While the phenomenology of surplus excitement and limit in overwhelm makes it appear similar to the kind of dysregulation or traumatic overstimulation that we worry about with in moments like this, it's best understood as an extreme state, the one that is very hard to sit with for everybody involved, that can bring about the shattering of the ego, a radical unbinding that can actually prove transformative. The paradox of limit consents, complex negotiations. I'm asking you to take my no, not to mean no, but also to not stop at your no either, which is, I think, a very critical component, so that by trespassing them both, you can take us into a state of more and more, involves really leaving aside the ordinary ways we patrol boundaries in everyday life. Such relinquishment courts a state of receptivity that can look like passivity, but that would be mistaken, but it's also not activity. It isn't passivity in the sense that Lumi is not capitulating to Imani's will. The term passibility expresses this crucial distinction. Passibility is not opposed to activity, but it is rather a state by which we receive and as a result modify and perhaps even enjoy. It involves a giving of oneself over to another, yielding states where one is besieged, dispossessed of oneself, subject to another. In talking about possibility, I'm not only talking about Lumi. From Imani's angle, complying with Lumi's request is not at all simple. So much can go wrong. So agreeing to Lumi's new directions will court a certain kind of edge. Imani could go too far, traumatizing Lumi, and in such case also herself. And it is precisely because Imani understands this risk that she hesitates. If she decides to go with Lumi's ask, she will have to suspend her own conscious preference to play it safe. On a less conscious level, deliberately crossing the line of Lumi's no, she will have to also bear the rousing of something inside of her, which will in turn help her fuel the forcing of Lumi, violating Lumi's no, the sincerity of which cannot be calibrated ahead of time. Imani, that is, will not.
Guys, if you're bored when you're listening to this, try a hobby. Get some knitting. Get something you can do with your hands. Maybe drink a beer or two. Have a snack. Like there are any number of ways, and I bring this up because Emma says, like, you're so right, Karlyn. I tried to show Eastern European cinematography to Americans because I wanted to show socialist culture living in communism, and within a matter of minutes you got, this is boring, this isn't fun, there's no lightning coming across the stream, there's no explosions, where's all the action? This is, I know, but this is why the left wins. Honestly, get some slime, get a fidget fucking thing, like like do some chores while you're doing it. Like there's any number of things that people could be doing. Why don't you guys go research the left and like send us all your information that you find while you're listening to this? I mean, there are any number of things that people can do to like be entertained. I usually knit. I'm not knitting right now, but I'm about to start because it is a little dry. But the thing of it is, if we don't listen to this stuff, no one is going to listen to this stuff. And we saw this yesterday on the stream, where most of what we listened to yesterday was boring. And then we got to the bit where they're talking about DIY trans hormones and DIY abortion. So it's kind of like, you have to listen to all the boring stuff. You have to do it, because if you don't listen to the boring stuff, you never find the golden nuggets. You never understand what they're actually planning and what they're actually doing. And you've just got to train yourself. I'm not saying specifically to UF, I'm just saying in general. Like, you've got to train yourself just to do it and to find other ways to like occupy your mind while you're doing it.
Not just be innocently playing along. She will not be just performing. The force roused in Imani is linked to infantile sexuality, to her own sadomasochism, to a form of sadism that...
What? Linked to infantile sexuality? What the fuck does that mean? Does infantile sexuality mean dressing like a baby and wearing a diaper, or does infantile sexuality mean something else? Hello, Freud. Hello, Freud. Fucking Freud again.
Less conscious level, deliberately crossing the line of Lumi's no, she will have to also bear the rousing of something inside of her, which will in turn help her fuel the forcing of Lumi, violating Lumi's no, the sincerity of which cannot be calibrated ahead of time. Imani, that is, will not just be innocently playing along. She will not be just performing. The force roused in Imani is linked to infantile sexuality, to her own sadomasochism, to a form of sadism that Freud called the most common and the most significant of all perversions. This force subtends all psychosexuality, and while it is not necessarily destructive, it is a force that can get out of hand. The risk, in other words, is very ordinary, and yet depending on how things are handled, it can cause extraordinary pain or trauma. At the same time, Imani's normative sadism will, of course, have to be balanced against her concern for Lumi's well-being. So Imani will have to assume two kinds of risks. One, the conscious one, she will have to kind of like talk herself down from her worry that she will upset or hurt Lumi. But less consciously, what she has to do is she has to be willing to tolerate a largely sadistic unconscious desire in her, a desire that is not pathological but common to all of us. It is that normative sadism that will ultimately drive the push past Lumi's no. And in fact, in order to be able to do this, she has to be able to resist her own inclination to want to keep things safe. She will have to bend her own will. She will have to be working with and against herself. Neither Imani nor Lumi know what comes next, and that, in fact, is exactly the point. We begin to see that Imani's participation also paradoxically requires a tentative surrender to Lumi's desire, and to the unknowability of what follows. Lumi too is setting up the conditions of a surrender, of course, though as a child she's less aware of that, and this has different implications for thinking about adult sexuality, which I'll talk about more in a second. What they are implicitly agreeing to in this negotiation is to be subjected to something unknown. We can't know why Lumi makes this request. Perhaps, sated with a repetition, she wants to experience something new. And this is what we need, a different kind of consent form, one that, unlike affirmative consent, is predicated not on setting limits and observing them, but on initiating and responding to an invitation to transgress them. Limit consent has an interpersonal syntax that does not entail the assertion of one's sovereign boundaries, but rather centers on this surrender. And this surrender can enable a new experience, but a move into this unknown territory risks injury. But if injury occurs in limit consent as opposed to affirmative consent, it is inadvertent. It results from infantile sexual urges that have gone too far, gone far beyond play, with neither party knowing it until after the fact. So Lumi may not know as a child, but also adults don't know exactly why they're asking for the kinds of sexual experiences they're asking for, because we are not really in possession of, we don't have knowledge about our desire. There's always something opaque to us. In psychoanalysis, would say something unconscious about what drives us to these kinds of moments. And for that reason, limit consent also plays with and calls into the conversation the question of one's own opacity. If we imagine, If we imagine for a moment a related but different scene in which two adults, I'm going to just talk it out. I don't need to be reading for this. But let's imagine for a moment a comparable, but of course different scenario of two adults being in a play rape scene. We can, let's also imagine that the bottom is somebody who has suffered sexual abuse or some kind of sexual trauma and comes into this with the usual story around why people play with trauma, at least in BDSM context, non-pathologizing context, is that the point is to recreate circumstances that have been very difficult under conditions of some degree of mastery or control. And yet, of course, this is impossible to predict or accomplish. And I would argue that it's actually not always or even necessarily the point. There are types of play in which these kinds of encounters are more about finding ways to be in the trauma, returning to the wound, rather than trying to heal the wound. And I have, in Sexuality Beyond Consent, I have a very fleshed out argument about my concerns about rhetorics of healing or the reparative, the ways in which these actually work to embroil us in what is already known in known scenarios and what is already represented, what is socially acceptable, even within queer communities, queer and kink communities.
Hang on.
One of the things.
These are not liberals. These are not liberals. These are radical revolutionary socialists. No, those are not the same thing. It is very important that people understand what we're watching. We do not watch liberals on this channel. We do not watch Democrats on this channel. We very rarely watch progressives on this channel. We watch radical revolutionary socialists. It's okay. We're going to break you of this habit. We need to break you of this habit, because here's the thing. When you listen, when you're still learning, when you're still new, whatever, it is what it is. But you've got to understand that when you conflate these groups, you're running cover for the real far left. Because these people, I promise you, they hate liberals. They probably hate liberals more than you do.
Things that I would kind of like to think about tonight, thinking about exigent sadism, is what is being asked of the exigent sadist, who has to follow kind of like their own sexual unconscious, to follow the exigency of the sexual drive. At a moment
I need more
that
alcohol.
where the stakes are very high about questions about safety, questions about pleasure, questions about relationships, questions about who is who survives the scene. How do you come out on the other end of the scene? But this also requires thinking with limit consent, thinking not with a reparative, but thinking with what it means to return to the wound, requires a different kind of interpersonal coordinates, I believe. I think it requires us to think about intimacy in a very different way, to think with the possibility of injury, with what happens when inadvertently somebody gets hurt or pained or emotionally scarred. What does it mean to return with people through their scars, to their scars, rather than looking for ways to close the wound? I think I'll stop here. There's a lot to say around sadism, but maybe we'll open it.
Thank you both
Next.
so much. I mean, we have so much to think with already. And I actually think it makes sense to start with where you left us. This question of what is being asked of the sadist, I think, is a really interesting question in relation to your memoir as well, or that section that you read. Because on the one hand, when you're thinking about this question of this play rape scene, there's an ask being made for that person to join the bottom in this kind of return to trauma and staying with the wound. And there's also the fact, as you show in your scene, you could be thinking that the bottom could think they're asking a simple, repetitive scene that's happened time and time again, not knowing, either of you, that action can bring the sadist to an unknown place. And I think there's something here that we can think about in terms of the vulnerability and risk of sadism. So maybe we can start there.
Okay. What you're really asking is, aren't the liberals useful idiots for the socialists? No, the liberals are not the useful idiots for the socialists. The liberals don't know anything about this shit. The liberals are not involved in this shit. And quite frankly, the liberals are the least of your problems. And if you're spending all your time worrying about the liberals, your eye is completely off the ball. There is no reality in which the liberals are doing the bidding of the socialists. The liberals believe in completely different things than the socialists. They're pushing completely different policies than the socialists. And every single time you guys conflate them because you can't get over the cognitive dissonance that your influencers have given you because you listen to people who lied to you for a really long time. Every single time you do this, you allow these people to win. This has nothing to do with liberal nothing. Do you understand? Yes or no? If you do not understand, now is the time to ask a question. If you do understand, saying yes would be appropriate. I have to hit conservatives over the head with this every single week. Because conservatives do not want to hear that liberals and socialists are not the same thing. I would call them radical revolutionary socialists. Leftists are acceptable as well. But I would be really more specific than that. These are socialists and communists. These are revolutionary socialists, revolutionary communists. Do you understand? No. I know what you're doing. You're playing a gotcha game. We don't give a fuck what liberals think. You want to know why? Liberals are not the one driving the agenda. Liberals are, if you think that liberals are the biggest problem that you have to face, you need to watch a lot more of this. Anyway, let's continue. Obviously, that so particular conservative isn't getting it.
Yeah, so I think that when I think about sadism and how tops or dominatrixes talk about sadism, there is this heightened sort of glory within sadism, right? Which is like very appealing and it seems like very sexy. But in actuality, it's holding so much tension of going into a scene day after day with different, sometimes people, clients you barely know. And sometimes that's better because of the
Oh, she's a
anonymous
sex worker.
feature, but
Okay,
also
got it.
to have to enact sadism within that space of it's really interesting how there's like these ruptures that if you actually bring too much sadism, if you bring your anger, if you bring a very real feeling of wanting to go to that overwhelm for both yourself as well as the bottom that you're playing with, the danger in that is very real. There's so many of us who have actually, we call it top drop, right? Where we come out of the scene and we're either wrestling.
You have never heard of the real socialists because no one on the right talks about them. So I could name you a bunch of names and you have probably never heard of any of them. So just keep watching. And guys, can we please, I understand if people are new and you have questions, that's fine. But can we please focus on the content of the presentation? If people are new, you can go to my Substack, go to the How to Speak Socialist section on my Substack. There are 2 on-demand classes that you can take right at the top. One is called Re-Education, one is called How to Speak Socialist, and you can take those classes to get up to speed on my work. But we've got a lot of stuff to get through tonight, and if you keep asking questions that are unrelated to the content, we are literally going to be here all night. It's decodetheleft.com/map, but someone can post the link, but it's decodetheleft.com/map.
With the shame, because coming from a childhood of violence, I was always questioning, am I reenacting abuse? At the same time, it's something that like we keep returning to, and just speaking on what you were
Thank you, Reagan.
Reading all these. This idea that the liminal consent, I keep calling it liminal consent instead of limit consent, but how, I don't know, I think that the sensible sadism, for one thing, I think I would have been like offended as a dominatrix if somebody calls it sensible sadism to me. I'd be like, that sounds like ugly shoes.
Appreciate it.
This is not subtle, sensible sadism. This is real sadism. Like there's something about like how, going into scenes with certain partners that you do know well, how you really can burst to the other side of, sometimes feeling like, wow, that scene was fueled by something else that is in our relationship that we weren't speaking about. But damn, slapping you felt really good because I really needed to do that. You're bringing something that is through the body of language that's needed in these types of scenes to make it feel exigent.
I love that the term sensible sadism annoys. That's purposeful because there's something about kind of like how in kink spaces and kink theory, we are told sadism is supposed to work, and it has a very mimetic as if quality, and therefore we were not prepared for kind of like the more kind of like to talk a little bit about.
Really? Was that worth $2 to get banned so you can tell me I've let myself go? Really? Okay. Hey, thanks for the money. You just got permanently banned. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Kind of like what needs to be engaged at moments like this, if you allow yourself to go into that space, to kind of like that the sexual drive also has a demonic quality. And it has, if we're not talking about service topping, which is a way to play, right? And
Yo!
there's nothing wrong with that. I don't, usually that's used in a derogatory way, and I don't mean it that.
I did get it. It says on my end it went through. It says on my end you sent me $200 super chat. So you know. So thank you, Bank Fraud Alert. Thank you, Bank Fraud Alert. Well, you know what? I'm gonna credit you with both. Thank you so much for the super chats. I appreciate it.
That way. I think that we need to, I really don't mean it that way. I think it's very legitimate to want that kind of scene and for somebody to want to provide it. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think we also need to call it what it is, not to degrade it, but to actually make room for different forms of sadism. And we don't have room for many forms of sadism. So to kind of like to allow something demonic to course through you and to not quite know, to have these questions. Is it repetition? Is it about my past? Is it about the intensity of what the other person wants? Is this even wanted? I'm not talking about kind of like violation, and that's a really huge qualifier to make. I'm not talking about exploitation. I'm not talking about kind of like somebody walks in with an intent to just get what they want and they don't care about the other person. But there is also, and I think there's no way around it, there is a ruthlessness to sex. There's moments where there's something ruthless about wanting what you want. So the question is like, how do we talk about that? And how do we talk about the ethics of engaging in these kinds of encounters if we also agree that there is a certain degree of risk involved in them, then we can no longer rely on the outcome to adjudicate whether the encounter was ethical or not. Like something else needs to happen. And usually, if something went wrong, then the immediate implication is that that was unethical, or something was problematic about the negotiation if it had been discussed more. But as you were speaking, you know, it also made me, I wanted to ask you this question when you were talking about kind of like working, doing scenes versus kind of like lifestyle scenes. Like, I wonder if you would talk a little bit more about kind of like how you think about those different positions and how clear are these boundaries?
Yeah, I think there was like different times during my career that I was looking at it differently, right? So like the progression of what I was looking for through BDSM. And I was definitely chasing the healing. I was definitely chasing the healing. Actually, when Vander Kolk's book came out, we were all like, oh yes, instead of yoga, just put in BDSM and body holds the score. We were all reading it thinking like, yes, we've been doing this for years. We're healing. But we weren't, you know, as you said, like there, sometimes it feels, but then.
Well, I'm still going to give you credit, Steve-O.
In your books, like to have like an
I appreciate
incredibly
it.
negotiated fully consented scene can be very boring, right? And I've had plenty of that.
Hey, we got another gifted membership. Who got that gifted membership? F received a gifted membership. Congratulations, F. Thank you, Complex PTSD. Appreciate it.
There's plenty of times when the client is, you know, we're just playing within the safe words. And I will admit up here that like it's some of my best scenes of where I felt really just full of like just that exigent sadism was with the most annoying clients because I was bringing this feeling of annoyance. Like they were so annoying. I wanted to, and then I could be like incredibly creative too in how I was going to interact with them. Because to actually, and also for a while, you know, going in as a dom, and it's just, as I said, sadism is so beautiful and glorious. I was advertising as a extreme sadist, so I was getting a lot of masochists, so much to the point where there were scenes. Then I've, you know, talked about this quite often of how it would be too much. You know, at one point during a cutting scene, there was just
Thank you,
so
Jonathan.
much blood with somebody I just had met. That I felt so overwhelmed.
What?
I just really, you know.
What? What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? Thanks for the money, bro. Appreciate it. Hang on. She was cutting someone and there was a lot of blood? Again?
as a dom, and it's just, as I said, sadism so beautiful and glorious. I was advertising as a extreme sadist, so I was getting a lot of masochists, so much to the point where there were scenes. Then I've talked about this quite often of how it would be too much. At one point during a cutting scene, there was just so much blood with somebody I just had met that I felt so overwhelmed. I just really, felt myself drop and just go into a space of that. I don't want to keep pushing myself to this space.
This is a college, ma'am.
And so I had to withdraw. And then I turned to bondage because the long-term bondage seemed safer to me, to be honest. And it was service topping, because putting somebody into this elaborate bondage, there's times when you can be sadistic, but it's very much more like you're swaddling the infant and they're going into that space instead. And it's lucrative because it's a long scene, It is very
made a lot of
different
money.
with personal
Capitalism.
partners. I have played with personal partners, as I said, where there is that anger, or there's something underwriting that comes into the scene that makes it really.
Hang on. I know conservatives heard the word demonic and all your fucking Christianity went off. This has nothing to do with Christianity and Satanism. This is not, they don't say demonic in the same way you guys say it. So everyone needs to put aside their fucking Christianity, because I understand that once you hear the word demonic, every Christian goes, and that's all you fucking hear for the rest of it. This has nothing to do with that.
Go that extra, into this point of rupture or excitement. But I also can say that there's times when I'm too careful, and there's definitely times through my life where I've said to, I've had to actually say, I actually do want to take a break from sadism. I don't want to push this person to that limit of we all
need a break every now and again.
I don't want to have to take care of that for myself.
I think it's so amazing hearing you talk about this, because this is something that I heard in my research as well. I did ethnographic research on dominatrixes here in New York, and I think there's something about the anonymity, the boundedness, the distance and impersonality of sessions, and the disdain sometimes. The fact that there is a kind of not necessarily antagonism, but there's not that kind of deep intimacy and knowing that can actually be quite productive of very intense sexual experience and very intense sadism for doms, who then have to navigate why that's happening in that space in a way that's actually not available to them with their personal partners. And I think the complexity of those feelings is also then compounded by the fact that the clients are having these experiences and aren't part of a community infrastructure where there's anyone they can talk to about them, which brings its own whole sort of ethical questions to then what's happening. Not to mention in a lot of the negotiations that I observed, there's one thing to say that we don't know ourselves ultimately, but a lot of the people that are seeing dominatrixes really don't have any of that language.
Is this the real guy?
And so the things that they're asking...
Is this the real Judge Napolitano? Seriously? This is not the real guy. Well, if it is, welcome. Yeah, we watch some crazy dystopian stuff here. If it's not, welcome anyway, I guess.
For doms learn to give them something that they can't even articulate, which is even riskier, because then you're in a place that's beyond any narrative that person even has of themselves. And there's no infrastructure, or it's a different kind of infrastructure to then hold what gets cracked open in that space.
I
love
wow.
where this conversation is going. And I'm gonna kind of like push it to say, so when you're speaking about kind of like having these very powerful experiences with clients, when you're talking about kind of like somebody being annoying, and then you actually go there, like so that the annoyance or the anger becomes kind of like the lubricant. It's what helps you bend your will. Like there's less of a will to bend because you're not feeling as protective. You don't have that kind of attachment. And you were talking about the like the intensity, the kinds of intimacies that happen with people who have less language. And in some ways, actually, that might make for a different kind of sexual experience, having less language. So we are so overprivileged, and this is one of the things that I was trying to do in Sexuality Beyond Consent, talk about how much we overprivilege understanding, insight, kind of like having a sense of yourself.
You have other
such
forms?
that if you
Oh,
are in
right.
that space, that is a very particular kind of intimacy. So what would it mean to have that and intimacy with somebody? I mean, there's something very extraordinary about what can happen in the context of an exigently sadistic encounter with somebody that you actually also have a relationship with. And that, so I'm wondering about that. And also, I want to say just one more thing, that I would think that somebody who comes in and says, I also wonder what it would be like to think about scenes that involve two sadists. Because the kind of sadism that I'm talking about, I'm not talking about like who holds the whip or who like does the bondage or
It doesn't mean demonic as in Christianity. These people don't think about Christianity. And listen, demonic is one of those words where again, like I said, there are some words and there are some topics where if you say those words and topics, it spins every person that's on the right up, and that's literally all they hear, and they don't hear anything else. And then all of a sudden I have a chat full of people saying this is literally demonic and this is Satanism and blah 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 blah. And it's all because this is what conservatives are constantly fed through their influencer sphere. And so they hear things like that, or they hear something about child anything, and they're like, this is all pedophilia. Da! And it's like the reason I bring this up is once those words get said, you can't teach people anything because they can't hear it, because all they're doing in their head is going demonic, pedophile, demonic, pedophile, demonic, pedophile. That's like, we've seen this over and over and over and over and over again. So when they're saying demonic, they're not saying it in a Christian context, because these people are probably not Christians. They're probably not religious at all. And so it's like they're saying it maybe in terms of like thinking about like darkness or thinking about it in a more artful way, but they're not saying it in the way that you might think of it. Ultimately, oh God, ultimately, it's just something that we should just ignore and move on from, because it actually doesn't have any relevance to the content of what they're talking about. Okay? So, can we just move on? I understand why you're asking. It's a fair question to ask, but it's kind of like one of those things where once we go down this road, it will be all we talk about for the entire rest of the time.
I'm talking about what it means to have two people in the room, both of whom are prepared for this, both of whom are willing to bend their wills independently of who has what position in terms of like top bottom. I really want to really disaggregate topping and bottoming from sadism, and think of sadism and masochism as not always complementary, but also think of sadist pairs who are not just competing about who's going to top whom, or bottom pairs who are competing over who's going to do the dishes, right? Okay. But like, what does it mean to bring that kind of, that demonic energy, the kind of like into an encounter and go for it?
Wondering too, though, how, when those two people enter this kind of, encounter or relationship, so much has to be also considered about who has more power, who has more privilege, right? who may have more trauma, or I guess more trauma is not
Yes,
the right
power
way of
plus
putting it, since we can't
privilege.
measure them in beaker glasses, but I'm wondering, how does that play into also that relationship of, if we were to have two sadists? We could also, I would love to hear about how you decide to use the words exigent sadism Because first, when I was reading the book, I kept thinking, where's the masochism? Because it seems like it's an openness into, usually we think of the masochist as the one who's being opened to or allowing themselves to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, before we get into that, I do want to the idea of two sadists. I'm actually thinking about, and this Saturday there's going to be that's the film screening of Exigent Sadism that Natasha Gornick is organizing, and one of the films in that series is between MJ Tom and Cleo Oyoung, who have been in an
Hey,
artist
Donnie, I
dynamic
see you.
for several years, and they've approached that dynamic sadistically, I would say. In the film that's going to be shown, the two of them had an encounter in which MJ asked Cleo to lock her in a studio for 72 hours. And so MJ was sort of the bottom, but not actually, because she was bringing the desire to
Oh,
push
that's interesting.
herself and Cleo in the experience.
That's actually interesting. FetLife says a demon role is a primal predator and protect. So it's actually like a BDSM thing. It's like an actual role play thing. That's actually okay. I wouldn't have thought of that. Thank you. Appreciate it. The name of this lecture is Exigent Sadism, and it was given at the City College of New York in March 2025.
And in the video that Cleo made of the encounter, it's her unraveling. She's the one whipping MJ, but as she's doing it, she literally is feeling that tide that you describe rising in herself, and she ends up being the one who unravels through this experience. The experience of imprisoning someone for 72 hours was so disturbing for her that it left her transformed, and MJ mostly walked out unscathed. But I think in that instance, even to return to sort of what you were saying, it wasn't a question of who had necessarily more trauma or more power. That was figured out on the playing field in the encounter between that exchange.
I think this is a great example. It also reminds me of another performance that we talked about at ASA with MJ Tom and Alina Chan, where there was also kind of like, we also had a discussion around two sadists. So MJ Tom is the person to go to for two sadists. But I actually agree very much with what you're saying, because I think that the kinds of encounters that kind of like that I'm trying to think with exigent sadism are where two people present themselves to each other in a disarmed way. And I'm thinking of Pat Califia saying, oh, like, and you hear this in many BDSM, much BDSM theory, the idea that BDSM shows kind of like how power works, because you can redo it in a scene, you can play with it, you can resignify it, you can change. I think there's actually a line, I'm not going to be able to quote it, where he says you can just change like the side of your hanky, and the kind of like you can just change like whether you're a top or a bottom. Try doing that in real life. Change it, playing with your power that way. You can't do that in real life. But I think that it's very hard to know actually who has more power or less power in a scene, because people come in with their positionalities, of course, with their trauma. I don't know how to count trauma, who has like more or less, but clearly, like social positionalities, racial position, all of these things are true. And then there's an encounter, and in that encounter, things happen that you had no idea. Like somebody says a word that touches you in a certain way, and all of a sudden you're a little kid, or all of a sudden you're a rageful monster. And there's something about this is what I think is so magical and so fascinating, mesmerizing, and scary.
Do you want me to show you other panels in this series where they had men? Because you're trying to insinuate that only women are pushing this stuff, which is provably wrong, because they have all the panels in this series on videos, and there were in fact men. Hate to break the news to you. There were absolutely men involved in this. Just not in this specific one. Thank you, Complex PTSD Recovery, for the channel membership donation, and that was given to Russell. Congratulations, Russell.
About BDSM, that in that context, it can bring some BDSM. It can bring some of that up. So I
There
also
are men
wanted
in
to
this,
say one more
Randy.
thing about exigent sadism, your question about exigent sadism. I was really interested in this notion of something that feels exigent without necessarily feeling necessary to do for a reason, without having an aim, without having a goal, without having an object, that all of these are opportunistic. They arise in the moment. But sometimes there's this drivenness, this demonic quality that rises. And what would it mean to allow that to play out is part of what I'm curious about. And might that open up some conversations that we can have around BDSM not moving towards healing, but moving towards encounters with wounds. I think we are, not BDSM aside, I think that as human beings, we're drawn to our wounds. I think nobody ever gets healed from anything. I say this also as a practicing analyst.
What?
Nobody gets over their trauma. Like you establish perhaps different relationships with your trauma. You get transformed, but at the end of the day, many people, it's not unusual, many people want to have experiences of touching their wounds, brushing up against their wounds, and somebody who provides the space for that to happen, that's incredibly intimate.
So I'm thinking about how so many people within this community, we create these rituals to go back to trauma, whether it's actually creating an entire scene that is actually almost word for word scripted from some kind of childhood abuse to, as you were mentioning before, whether somebody who's gone through sexual assault wants to reenact it. Have you seen, or if we're not going to actually heal from it, does the playing of it again and again transform how we have the narrative? Because we've always thought about how thinking about the narrative of PTSD, things that we have of recreating the narrative can somehow keep you from going into PTSD or going into extreme dysregulation. Do you believe that actually being able to have repetition and of going back to the wound can provide a different narrative?
I think this is a really great question because it's a question that it's not with BDSM. An analyst could be asking me that question about what we call therapeutic action. Like what is the therapeutic action? Like what works? Like what makes things different? So I want to say something nerdily psychoanalytic for a moment, which is there's this psychoanalytic theorist called Hans Slowold, and he has this theory that like when you know that something works when the ghosts that haunt us are turned into ancestors. They're still there, they're in the background, you know they're there, but they're not like haunting you, they're not breathing up on you, like they're not following you everywhere, right? And this has really captured psychoanalytic imagination. A lot of things have been written about this form of taking trauma and making it more, not silencing it, but giving it a form, giving it a place, giving it a space and a history. But I actually don't believe that that ever fully happens. I think that there's no way to turn a traumatic experience into something that is never there. There's ways to avoid the circumstances, to avoid situations that might call it up. I think that you could be a survivor of sexual abuse and script a scene, a rape play scene that doesn't touch any of that, right? So kind of like a lot of scripting can also work, even though on some level it may look like it's about sexual abuse. It could be about a rape play scene. You could script it in a way that it doesn't actually touch anything, that is a live wire. So that's why kind of like what we were saying earlier about the specificity and the particularity of a situation is so, I think, critical. Now, to your question Like, how do we get to not having, and you're not asking it this way, but one way to think about it is like, how do we get to not having kind of like PTSD, to not having these, I don't think that we can answer that through, I cannot answer this as an analyst, let alone kind of like thinking through BDSM.
This
but there's
person is
also something
providing
about
mental
how
health
frightened we
advice to
are
people.
of our
Everyone think about
experiences.
that.
Like, I'm not talking about, we tend to think of trauma as something that breaks us, and we do things with our trauma. Trauma becomes part of us. Like, we have this fantasy that trauma can be excised, that the hope is to make it go away. And once trauma happens to you, and that's a terrible thing to say, but I think it's also true, there's no way to extract it from your psyche. So that's why I'm so interested in not what to do about trauma, but in what people do with their trauma, and how to have like wider ranges of possibilities around that.
I mean, I think this is it's like, it's something that I've observed in my research, something that I think you and I have talked about before, where there's in, sex work scholarship and sex work organizing and in the rhetoric, it's that sex workers are totally well-adjusted, normal people who are just doing this because they want to or because they just need to for money, and that's that. There's nothing else to see. And in fact, especially for dominatrixes, in order to hold someone in their wound, in their trauma, one has to be able to draw on their own experiences to a certain extent, to be able to pull from that reservoir, to actually create that container. And to say that risks saying that there is a role of trauma in this one type of sex work, which is risky because of the ways in which we've been blackmailed into not admitting that. And I wonder if this is a way for us to turn to something that we've wanted to talk about in this discussion, which is, your desire for this anti-reparative turn. And even throughout this series, like, people as part of this series have been using this language of healing, even if I don't think they necessarily practice this in their private lives, on stage, in these conversations, we feel like we have to. And something that you said when we were preparing for this was that this is an experience that marginalized communities and people have, where they have to have a cover. There has to be some way to make the thing they do respectable, or who they are respectable. And I wonder if we can think through the stakes of that, like here.
There's so much shame going into first feeling the impulses of sadomasochism as they override your sexual awakening. Especially coming from, I say especially, but I don't know. I don't know how other people feel from it, coming from other childhoods. So, but yeah, constantly questioning myself of whether I was reenacting abuse. And so finding, ways to first seeing it out about, I think, like, Madonna was the first time I really saw it, and it was like, yes, that's what I am, that's what I want. And then, going into sex work, going into stripper work, cabaret work, but
Cabaret work.
I think that finding community is like that first step of feeling like, okay, we're like with other people like us. It feels like a cult. We all dress in certain clothes. We have certain words, consensual non-consent, which is similar to limit consent. And I think that there is that problem of like constantly trying to justify what we're doing, constantly trying to justify ourselves as sex workers because of the shame and the stigma that's around it, as well as that we're constantly taught from a young age, don't hit somebody with a stick. And then all of a sudden I'm being paid to hit somebody with a stick in many times, and it feels good, and so like I think that there's like that tension that's very hard to translate for the greater public. I think that within community, we definitely we talk about like the gray areas, right? We talk about how consensual non-consent can really go wrong, or that we see the players to be dangerous players within the community, and how to then hold that of what we're speaking of, like trying to hold the space of exigency, but at the same time, really be able to call out abuse too when we see it or when you feel it, right? Because there's that too, like when you actually are feeling like, oh, there's definitely something that's going too dark, that maybe we can't come back from. So I'm curious about that too.
I think what you were saying about kind of like the shame, and I think that this is kind of like really important, like the defensive posture of I'm okay. Like this means nothing. It comes from nowhere. It has nothing to do with anything. It doesn't like. I mean, even the move towards thinking about kink as a sexual orientation, I think has this quality of like we were just born this way, which I think is a, kind of like a really politically problematic, even if. It understands itself to be as a leave us. It's a leave us alone, but also like a diminution of psychic complexity. Like we're just born this way. It means nothing. Doesn't apply for everyone, for anyone. And in fact, kind of like Anne Pellegrini and I wrote a book about this in relation to gender. Like, what does it mean to think of gender becoming also through trauma? But I think that kind of like what I found very interesting is that when you go kind of like to minoritarian experience and begin to look at the kinds of stories that are not said out loud because it would be discrediting or pathologizing and all of that, there's a theme, and a lot of these revolve around a relationship to trauma. Like, am I reenacting anything? I mean, are we not reenacting anything by being teachers, analysts? I mean, we're reenacting all the time. The idea that repetition is the special purview of some things as opposed to others. Power is repetition. White supremacy is repetition. Repetition is everywhere. It just gets singled out in certain domains, but so, and repetition of trauma, repetition of the same. So I think that it's really interesting to note how frightened, how traumatophobic is the word that I use in the book, we tend to be. We're so afraid of trauma, by which I don't mean we're afraid of being traumatized, of course, like that's very human, but that once we've been traumatized, we become nearly obsessed with how to, what's the right word? Sometimes I think in Greek, and when
They don't mean what you do
how
mean,
to really
folks.
like extract it, as if you can surgically go in and remove the trauma, as opposed to the trauma becomes part of your life. And I've learned a lot from Black feminisms about that, about what it means to kind of like function in the aftermath of kind of like a history of slavery, which will never be extracted. So what are you going to do? I mean, race play has been incredibly useful to my thinking about this, because it puts a lot of pressure on like, how do you think with trauma, within a traumatophilic context, about something that is, to go back to what you were saying about social power, kind of like problematic in a million ways politically. And yet people want what they want sexually. And if we're not going to try to legislate that, like we're going to have, I think, to think traumatophilically and move away from our almost fixation to cure, to getting over trauma, to healing the culture, to, I mean, how are you going to heal the culture from the history of slavery? I mean, that only gets you to the position of like how to hide things, how to pretend that things didn't happen. Things go into hiding. So I'm very hopeful for how we can look to minoritarian experience for the things that we are afraid to talk about, to teach us what we're not paying attention to.
And I think that that is a really interesting place, because we are reaching the end, to open up to questions, especially because you just brought us to
Q&A is always the best part. When they say supremacy, they don't mean the same thing you do. That's why they're not. You have different definitions of the term. When they're talking about white supremacy, they're talking about systemic racism. Systemic racism means the system that upholds racism. The system that upholds racism is capitalism. When you're saying supremacy, you mean something completely different.
some of the political implications that are beyond sex, the ways in which this conversation takes us beyond kink experiences and leather sex to a different, to like a much wider political arena. So with that, does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask? If they do, you can go and see Laura, who will have a microphone that you can use.
Are we comfortable passing the microphone, or do you want them to come down? That way you don't
Nope.
have to
No.
stand up.
No. You are not using the same definition of the term capitalism. When they say the term capitalism, they mean private property ownership. When you say the term capitalism, you mean an economic model. The left believes that capitalism is both an economic model and a cultural model, and it is not the same thing. So again, you have to start with the definitions of the words. Just because you define something one way doesn't mean they define it that way. You're talking about two different things. You're going like this. You're literally not talking about the same thing at all in any way.
Questions? Yes? Okay.
I'm going to do this in a way that feels absolutely non-judgmental at all. Because I'm so deeply intrigued by this space where, like, kink meets race play. And I guess the question I want to ask is, like, so you're playing in really dangerous territory, right? Particularly now. And the sort of, like, authorizing of, like, what we might think of as bad feeling, right? Like, the kind of feelings we're not supposed to or allowed to have. And I guess what I want to ask is, like, is this dangerous? Like, is this the way forward, right? Like, there's a world in which the thing you're offering, which is maybe we do kink, and it imagines that there is no complicated history of racialization, right? And we all get to sort of play in the space of race, and we get to say whatever we want to say to our partners in that space, and it's intimate, and it's collapsed between the two of us, and there's no outside to that. And I guess I wonder, like, but the reason that all of those sort of charged dynamics work is the history of race in America.
Okay. I need to explain something. Because the core of this guy's question has to do with why are queer Marxists, because these are queer Marxists, why are queer Marxists engaging in kink play and BDSM as a political statement in the first place? And so what people need to understand is that actually, let me just pull up the thing. Hang on. Let me just get something. I'm going to show you guys a chart that I got from a queer Marxist kink organization when we did we took a queer rope workshop. We learned all the ways in which to tie people up that was a form of political activism. Okay. I want to explain this. I want to make sure people understand. This is a flyer that was made by a queer Marxist organization to explain why kink is political. Because essentially it comes back to, I have to actually come in close because I can't see that because I'm not wearing my glasses. Because you practice rope play to practice a practice that derives from something, a technique used by the police to capture, interrogate, and torture people. So they're saying if you like being tied up during sex, you are mimicking the consensual power dynamics of the police when they arrest someone, okay? You like to be master to a slave and play with power hierarchies and labels that are detached in thousands of years of suffering. So when you're playing in these spaces, you're playing with the consensual power dynamics, you're playing with the power dynamics that are forced on people non-consensually, but you're doing it in a consensual manner. I'll talk to you. I'm happy to talk to you about this stuff. But you use floggers, whips, and canes, all of them implements that were and still are traditionally used to punish and dehumanize prisoners, slaves, etc. I don't know what that means. But you love your sissification. Actually, the Nazis in the chat are going to love where this is going. You guys are going to love it. Hang on. The Nazis in the chat, I need all the Nazis and the National Socialists. I need you guys to pay attention. Are you with me? Because you're going to love one of the things on this chart, okay? Not this one. You're going to love the next one. But you love your sissification so that you can play out traditional roles that women had to endure and suffer through hundreds of years. Pay attention, Nazis. This is the one you're going to like. But it's hot to do some race play, Nazi play, and engage in traditional 1950s household play. They're literally saying that they're using kink and BDSM to play being Nazis because fascism is forced on them unconsensually, but if they engage in fascism and Nazi play consensually, then they are turning the power dynamic on its head, and so it's their form. Yeah, see, I told you you were gonna like that. This is leftists telling you that they want to engage in Nazi BDSM kink play, but as a way of giving it the middle finger, essentially. Okay? Yup, all the Nazis are like, what? This poster is not about kink shaming. It's calling on you to reflect the fact that kink does not exist in the vacuum. It's a privilege to consensually play with these topics instead of being caught up in them without consent. It cannot be separated from politics, history, and lived experience. So essentially, why queer Marxists engage in kink and bondage and BDSM and all of this stuff that we're talking about is that they believe that capitalism oppresses everyone. We live in a capitalist world, a capitalist society. Every single person is oppressed by capitalism, and that oppression is taking place non-consensually. Kink is a consensual way to engage in the same power dynamics of capitalism, but you're doing it with full consent. Does everyone understand what we're talking about? I feel like this is very important context for what they were just talking about in that show and or in that lecture, and why that person is like, is this really what we're doing? Are we really using kink to just play out these different power dynamics? And by the way, remember, they all know this. Everyone in this room, yes, capitalism is literally raping us, and so that is why we have rape fantasies when we are playing out these kink BDSM things, because we are doing it consensually on our own terms, and every single person in the room knows this. So now let's go back and listen to this guy's question, because I think the two are like intimately connected, and I wanted to make sure people had this context because they all understand this, but you guys might not understand it.
I'm going to do this in a way that feels absolutely non-judgmental at all. Because I'm so deeply intrigued by this space where like kink meets race play. And I guess the question I want to ask is like, so you're playing in really dangerous territory, right? Particularly now. And the sort of like authorizing of like what we might think of as bad feeling, right? Like the kind of feelings we're not supposed to or allowed to have. And I guess what I want to ask is like, is this dangerous? Like, is this the way forward, right? Like, there's a world in which the thing you're offering, which is maybe we do kink, and it imagines that there is no complicated history of racialization, right? And we all get to sort of play in the space of race, and we get to say whatever we want to say to our partners in that space, and it's intimate, and it's collapsed between the two of us, and there's no outside to that. And I guess I wonder, like, but the reason that all of those sort of charged dynamics work is the history of race in America. And so
yeah, the real secret is I didn't move from anything to anything. I was always on their team to begin with. I just had to deal with, I'm not going to go into it. I just had to deal with big tech being a moron for a year and a half. Okay, I had to mitigate big tech being a moron for a year and a half, and I had to just let it work itself out. And he still didn't want to work it out, and so I forced the issue, and so now we're cool. I think. I don't know. but I never left. I casted a spell. I worked out the issue. Yeah, exactly. Anyway.
I'm left with this question of how do we do kink?
Big tech just still doesn't want it. Big tech
moment in a way that
big tech still just doesn't want to admit that he was wrong. Is the real issue? The spell did work on him. It did. He cooled it. He still doesn't want to admit he was wrong, but you know what? It's as close as I can get. He summoned a demon or something against me, and he put on a whole stream about it, so I guess that's as close as I'm going to get to an apology. Thank you, Dragon Ball. So is kink a form of therapy? Yeah, I do think for some of them, kink is a form of therapy. It sounds like reappropriation, a way of coping and healing and reclaiming power under oppression. That's exactly right. It's a way of reclaiming power in a world in which they are oppressed and lack power. That's actually a really good way to put it. Yeah, it is. It is. It is actually a complete Pisces move to not apologize when he is obviously and clearly wrong. It is a total Pisces. Pisces never apologize when they're wrong. But trust me, he knows he's wrong. And I know he knows he's wrong because he put on a whole 9-hour stream where he put on a whole act about a demon and some such thing. So I don't know. Whatever. It doesn't matter. He's already gone back to not talking to me anymore again, so, you know, we're back to square one with that one. But whatever. It worked itself out. Anyway, I'm not going to keep going back to that. Let's listen. Everyone pay attention.
Whatever we want to say to our partners in that space, and it's intimate, and it's collapsed between the two of us, and there's no outside to that. And I guess I wonder, like, but the reason that all of those sort of charged dynamics work is the history of race in America. And so I'm left with this question of how do we do kink in this moment in a way that feels in any way not like it's participating inside of like the thing that is us all having accepted that MAGA is where we are.
Thank you.
I am not saying that all kink is race play. I'm saying that race play has helped me think very clearly about some things about heterophilia. But I would say is this the way forward? I don't know if this is the way forward. That's a big question. I can't answer that question. But what I would say is, and perhaps this will take us to how we started with how there is no way to have a conversation about exigent sadism without also it being in the conversation and performed, not as in acted out, but being present. Like I would say, so what are we going to say to people for whom these desires are there? Are we going to tell them like you shouldn't do it? Are we going to start legislating that? What is the language that we're going to, we need vocabularies, we need ways of thinking for people to be able to have these spaces. Now, is it dangerous? 100%. I would have said this a year ago.
I'm sorry. MAGA kink is when you go to CPAC and you get on Tinder and you get a gay lover to your hotel room and then you have gay sex and you do a lot of blow. That's what MAGA kink is. Like that is the extent of MAGA kink is gay hookers and blow in a hotel room at CPAC, okay?
Even more worried about it now. But what are we
Grindr.
doing?
Thank you.
If
Grindr.
In response to the danger that
Not
is
Tinder,
outside,
Grindr.
we start giving ourselves not giving ourselves the dignity of complexity. What does it mean for us to start speaking about desires as too dangerous to talk about right now? What if we start constricting? Like I actually think, and this is, I'm not a politician, I'm not like a policymaker, I may be completely wrong about, I think this is the time to double down. I don't think this is the time to retreat. Like many of us in this room are gonna suffer in very varied and different ways about what's happening politically right now. I don't think this is the time to play it safe, I really don't. I think, you know, I really believe in exigent sadism. Like it's I'm not just writing about this. Like I think we need to double down. So for me, like, is it dangerous? Might somebody be kind of like,
yeah, let's
could
double
this
down.
be
Great
misused?
idea.
Like Anne and I thought about this a lot when we wrote that even transness could come out of trauma. That why would transness not have a repetition with trauma when normative gender has a repetition of trauma? I'm not going to be able to flesh out this argument here, but what, like,
a CUNY lecture is admitting that being trans comes out of trauma? Yo, we're going to get this lady canceled. We're going to make sure the trans activists on Twitter cancel this lady and they're going to call her a transphobe. It's going to be awesome. We're going to clip this out of context and we're going to make sure that the trans activists get this and her name and all that stuff. It's going to be great.
I just realized I threw a bomb in the room, but
Yeah, you did. Yeah,
um,
you did. Yeah, you did, bitch. Yeah, you did. Tell us again how transness is a result of trauma.
it was like Anne and I thought about this a lot when we wrote that even transness could come out of trauma. That why would transness not have a repetition with trauma when normative gender has a repetition of trauma? I'm not going to be able to flesh out this argument here, but what, like, I just realized I threw a bomb in the room, um, but what does it mean for us to actually begin to talk, to say, yes, if you're doing sex work, maybe there is something there. And what if there is something there and that's not the end of the conversation?
I would also say that the people that we've spoken to who are doing race play, or if we're talking even about the play itself, of Jeremy Harris, that nobody's pretending that those histories don't exist, or that those dynamics, or that what is going on in the world has ceased to exist outside of the bedroom. It's so important to actually bring those conversations into the bedroom as well. Knowing though sometimes that both is going to be dangerous and exciting. You know, these two things can go hand in hand of what we were talking about, exigent sadism, and they can push you to a level that perhaps the dialogue starts to get just embodied rather than actually through language.
I would add, it also gets more real. You know, it gets more real. Like I'm thinking there's types of race play, like I'm thinking of Mistress Velvet's work, kind of like who is actually, who used to use kind of like her sessions to teach white men about Black feminism, right? And then, you know, and I was interviewing Mike Bond for my book, and he said to me, like, look, what about me? Like, I don't want like the kind of like the civil rights scenario. He said to me, I want my boner justice rights. I don't want my civil justice rights. He was like, I want to be able to be in front of a white woman on my knees. So kind of like there's many variations of race play. And I am not, and he said to me, and I think it's a really interesting argument, like, he said to me, like, I am not interested in being legislated over because my desires are politically incorrect. No, thank you. And if we're not going to do this with a variety of other kinds of play, like rape play, for example, why would we do it with race?
I also say from my own experience of having Asian fetishists come to me as a sex worker, first of all, that would fuel a lot of the harder sadism that I would employ. But also,
Yeah.
Lina Chen has
Yeah.
said this, that, you know, that within sex work, it becomes a point of economic, you know, reparations, where we are Asian people,
Wait,
white men are
wait,
coming.
wait. Sex work is a form of reparations. Look, it says it on the screen. Sex work is a form of reparations. Again, Asian sex worker.
Other kinds of play, like rape play, for example, why would we do it with race?
I also say from my own experience of having Asian fetishists come to me as a sex worker, first of all, that would fuel a lot of the harder sadism that I would employ. But also, Lina Chen has said this, that, you know, that within sex work, it becomes a point of economic, you know, reparations, where we are Asian people, white men are coming to us and paying us. And the same, she's written that, like, you know, the same man that is at a strip club is this person that I'm going to make a beeline for because I know I'm going to make money from him, but I will avoid him at the bar on my own social time. So there's ways of looking at both kink as well as sex work, of like, how does race play come into that? How do some DOMs really use it to their advantage? Some people assign readings for like feminist readings, race readings, but also I'm thinking about like how I'm doing organizing with massage workers who within the hierarchy scale have a lot less privilege than myself and don't.
It's not the hierarchy scale. It's the whorearchy scale. where some whores have more privilege than other whores. This is okay, like I would find all of this mildly amusing if this wasn't a lecture at a publicly funded university.
Race readings, but also I'm thinking about like how I'm doing organizing with massage workers who within the hierarchy scale have a lot less privilege than myself and don't have the privilege of saying no to a client when I'm sorry, that they don't have the privilege of turning away a client because somebody's got an Asian fetish, where at a certain point in my career, I was able to sort of weed people out. Yeah.
And I also want to say, and I know that we're answering a lot with this question, but there's a lot here that in my research, I, spoke with and observed sessions with Latinx and Black doms and Asian doms who had to navigate race play in their scenes in not the hot redemptive way, but in a way that was nonetheless participating in precisely the kinds of conversations that we're having here that would stir complex feelings.
Oh, bro. Dragon Balls, thank you for that. I appreciate that. What is hierarchy and why it's wrong? Oh, great. There's a whole article about hierarchy. Oh, great. Great. Thank you. Thank you.
That would bring back traumatic memories or create new ones that would, stir tides of sadistic desires that were then hard to kind of navigate in the aftermath. And I think that having these frameworks and having language to sort of speak about what that process is will not just help us understand people like Mistress Velvet, who was amazing and who was doing race play in this really intentional way, or Lena's work as well, or what you're saying here, but also those sex workers who are experiencing race play in sessions, and it's not part of their fantasy unless it becomes that way in ways that they didn't necessarily anticipate or desire.
Hi, thanks so much for doing the work that you do. My question is about education. I guess I view the way that consent has been handled in education to be very focused on this idea of enthusiastic, verbal, affirmative consent. And I'm wondering how you think we should change or modify education to make room for some of the ideas you're talking about, encourage young sadists to explore that side of themselves in a way that feels...
When they say race, they are talking about it like a social construct. They think that Black people with Black skin color can be white too. So they are talking about it in that way. I understand why it might not come across that way, but they don't think about it in terms of the color of your skin. They think about it as your position in the power structure. So when they're saying white people, they're not saying people with white skin color. They're saying who are the oppressors, who are the bourgeois, who are the property owners. When they say Black people, they're not thinking people with Black skin color. They're thinking who are the oppressed. And if a person has Black skin color, but they're part of the capitalist class, the ownership class, then they are considered to be white. Yeah, exactly. Kanye is considered to be white. They would refer to Kanye as white.
Authentic and safe.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yep.
I'm sorry, I have to
And by the way, I have them on video saying that. If you send me a DM, I will send you the videos. I'm not going to play them on the stream, but if you send me a DM asking, if you're interested in seeing it, I will send you the video where I have them explicitly saying this. I have a Black woman explicitly saying this.
So exploring sadism is never going to be safe. It's or it's never going to feel safe, I don't believe. To explore consent, the verbal consent, I think that there is, like, the community does have these we have these consent agreements, right? Of learning of like, what does consent look like? What does
Yeah,
affirmative
Cheryl
consent
Harris.
look like? I think that I would definitely say, to somebody who's going to come into, who's just starting off, I would definitely say do the 101 of consent. To be honest, I don't think the entire time that I was a professional dom, I never took away somebody's safe word. I always, and even people who didn't want to use the safe word, I actually refused. That was just my limit. I was just said, like, you can not say it, but it will always be there for me, for myself. So I think that you really have to look at, like, how do you want to look at that? But the community guidelines, I believe, are there for a reason as well. So I think it's interesting that we're talking about being able to push to a space of exigent sadism, but I don't know, I was speaking to Cass about how, but within community, we still have to uphold certain guidelines to keep each other safe, especially for the people who are just starting off and learning. You have to have training wheels.
I agree with that. And the idea of limit consent is not to say, get rid of everything else, because there are situations, like you need to know when a boundary has been crossed, and for that you need affirmative consent. But there's also so many the reason why I'm emphasizing limit consent is because there's so much emphasis on affirmative consent. But anything that's new, anything that happens that's exciting to us, what we learn from, happens at the limit of our consent. If not against our consent, your consent and at the limits of your consent or beyond consent are not the same thing. Anything that, like I'll speak for myself. I think many memorable experiences that kind of like leave you with something either because they surprised you, they alarmed you, they took you out of your habitual, of course, experiences where you are affirmed, where you're recognized are also important, but they do different kind of psychic work than experiences that really startled you into something or that kind of like meet you at the border of what you thought you were signing up for. And to some degree, kind of like, for example, pedagogy is all at the border of somebody's consent. Yeah, people are laughing, so yeah.
So unfortunately, I think we are out of time for more questions. I see lots of hands, and there also are a lot of questions in the virtual Zoom room. And so for those of you who left your questions in the virtual Zoom room, we will share those with the panelists. And for those of you who have questions in the live room, maybe we can gather out in the lobby and have some conversations. But thanks to everyone.
All right. Now, guys, there is actually a second part of this presentation where they go on to a Zoom call. I'm going to be honest, though. I feel like tonight was a lot. It's not that I don't want to watch the second part of this. It's that I don't feel like I have another hour and a half in me. I just don't. I feel like this was a lot. We already got a ton of clips in this one. I got to go make them all. And we can watch the second half of this like maybe on Monday or something like that. Like we can be done earlier. That's okay. We can be done early. It's okay. It was a lot today. So I think we're going to call it there. I want to thank everyone who came out for Socialism Saturday tonight. As a reminder, we do Socialism Saturday every Saturday at 6 p.m. We do streaming Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. where I talk about other stuff. If you want to support the work I'm doing, exposing the far left, decoding their language, stuff like that, you can head over to my Substack. That is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Sign up for a membership, $8 a month, $80 a year. I have two undercover, well, actually, I have basically 2 undercover trips I want to do before the end of the year. One of them is actually going to be a longer trip, so there's actually going to be multiple undercover opportunities. If you want to fund that work and get access to the content when it's released, there's going to be some really good content coming out from these undercover things, guys. I promise you. Like, especially one of them, I was looking at it the other night. I'm like, oh, we're going to get a lot of good content. And the way I'm able to get that content and actually go into these leftist environments and actually record them and show you what they're doing in the real world. And I have to buy a disguise. I have to change my hair. I have to wear a chest binder. I have to dress up like a non-binary person. If you appreciate that, fund the work I'm doing over on the Substack. $8 a month, $80 a year. I will never sell out to a political shill narrative Zionist like machine like the Manhattan Institute. I will always tell you guys the truth. Thank you, White Stag, over on Rumble with the $20 Rumble rant. They use embodiment all the time in academia now. Great work. What's your sign? I guess Pisces. Sorry. Oh, I am not a Pisces. Do you have a gripe against National Socialism? No, I don't have a gripe against National Socialism at all. In fact, I have a clip coming up explaining I don't consider myself to be a National Socialist, but I have a lot of National Socialist friends or people of that affiliation. So I actually have a clip coming. I posted it on Twitter earlier today. I'm going to put it on my YouTube channel, explaining my position on that. So I don't have a gripe with it. I'm not joining any political tribe. I am appreciative of some of the aspects of fascism. And I am probably ever evolving on this issue, but I don't hate you guys or nothing. My sign, my astrological sign, I'll tell you the whole thing. I am an Aries sun with a Leo moon and Libra rising. I have Pluto in my first house. I have Mars and Venus in Aries. I am fiery AF. I don't have a single solitary bit of Earth in my entire chart. But yeah. So I'm not, listen, bro, I know that fascism is not national. I understand that. I'm not going into the whole explanation right now. I've just done a 3-hour stream. All right. Relax. Anyway, so I usually take Sundays off. I'm planning on taking Sunday off tomorrow. I will be back on Monday and I will see you guys then. So that's it. That's all we have for tonight. Guys, please make sure you mount the like button on the way out the door. Please make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you are not already. And I appreciate you guys coming out. I appreciate everyone that sent in a super chat. Thank you for allowing me to do what I do. And I'm leaving. I'm done. Okay, guys. Have a good rest of your night. We'll see you soon. Bye.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Would you give me some idea?
I am not completely like other people.
What do you mean by that?
People dislike me because I am not completely like them.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.